Chapter 23-23. From today onwards, we will begin our counterattack. Mo Tianji looked at Xie Danqiong and Mu Tsanglan. His eyes were sharp. Your mission is to restrain the majority of the enemy's forces. Mu Tsanglan and Xie Danqiong's faces turned serious. Restrain the majority of the enemy's forces. This would undoubtedly be a huge price to pay. This sentence meant that millions of lives or even more would be lost because of it. They were already at a disadvantage. If they had to take the initiative to attack and restrain the majority of the enemy's forces, they would have to mobilize all their forces. My men and the fresh troops that Chu Yang and I brought can all be under your command. However, the two of you cannot personally command the battle. You can do it today but not tomorrow or the day after. You have to cooperate with us and force Yuan Tianji out. Mo Tianji said calmly, I think General Meng should be able to take on this heavy responsibility. Meng Wuya stepped forward. I will not disappoint you. Today, I do not want to see any signs of the battle stopping. We must suppress the enemy until they are exhausted in 2 days and 1 night. This is a death order. We must carry it out to the end. Even if everyone dies, we must continue to carry it out. Mo Tianji said word by word. As he spoke, an abnormally strong smell of blood began to spread in the air. From this day onwards, the battle situation that had changed several times had undergone a fundamental change. In terms of strength, Mu Tsanglan's side was originally at an absolute disadvantage, and could even be said to be at an absolute disadvantage. Even with the arrival of Chu Yang's powerful reinforcements, even if it was not a drop in the bucket, it was still not much of a hindrance to the overall situation and could not affect the situation at all. They were still at a disadvantage. At most, they were no longer at a dead end. But during this period of time, the real factor that changed the battle situation was that Mu Tsanglan's side originally had no fighting spirit. But now the enemy was filled with doubts and apprehensions. No matter whether it was the soldiers or the generals, they no longer had the will to fight. In this way, Mu Tsanglan's side's absolute disadvantage was evened out. Although this was only a temporary phenomenon and was even an illusion built on top of an illusion, the current situation was like this. Now, while Yu Qi's side was worrying about how to mobilize the soldiers and motivate them to fight, Mu Tsanglan's side suddenly took the initiative to attack. Moreover, it was an omnidirectional, indiscriminate, unrestrained, and irregular attack. Facing this situation, Yu Qi and Yuan Tianji were both overjoyed at the unexpected good news. No matter what was wrong with the other party, or perhaps because he thought that reinforcements had arrived, he actually took the initiative to attack. However, Yuan Tianji didn't care about this at all, because it wasn't important at all. Even if a certain amount of reinforcements came, how many people could there be with just those few flying boats? Even if they were fully loaded with soldiers, how many people could there be? Thus, he immediately ordered Yu Qi, fight with all your might. Yu Lai naturally did not dare to be negligent in this regard. Different situations call for different actions. Although there were quite a number of generals who were unwilling to go to war and still harbored such thoughts in their hearts, there were still a large number of generals under Yu Hyo's command that could be mobilized. These people had been fighting against the Mu Tsanglan group for many years. They were Yu Qi's direct subordinates and had always been at a disadvantage when fighting against the Mu Tsanglan group. Now that they had a rare opportunity to hold their heads high, all of them were full of fighting spirit. As a result, an unprecedentedly fiery battle unfolded like a raging fire. Mu Tsanglan attacked even more powerfully. He appeared in the sky and directly challenged Yi Luoyue. How could Yi Luoyue be willing to back down in this battle? She immediately met the challenge. Furthermore, if someone like Mu Tsanglan who could single-handedly change the outcome of a battle joined the battle, it definitely wouldn't be a good thing. Yi Luoyue did not hesitate at all. She stepped forward bravely and met Mu Tsanglan in the sky. On the ground, under Xie Danqiong's precise command, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's army attacked from all directions in multiple batches like a surging tide. At the highest point, Mo Tianji was sitting on a chair. He gently fanned himself as he slowly observed the battlefield below. Of course, the main focus of his attention was on Yuan Tianji's monarch's camp. Without making a sound, his divine sense had already quietly penetrated into it. Under normal circumstances, under such a great battle atmosphere, the soldiers in the rear camp who didn't participate in the battle should be hot-blooded and eager to fight. However, right now, a large portion of the soldiers on Yuan Tianji's side who didn't participate in the battle were actually at a loss. They were even bored to death. This portion wasn't a small portion. In fact, it was a very, very large portion. While the battle at the front was in full swing, the shouts of battle shook the heavens and were deafening. However, many soldiers on the other side only raised their heads indifferently and returned to their daydreaming state. It wasn't just the soldiers. Even many of the commanders were distraught like this. There were also some people who gathered together to discuss something, and plan something. No matter what happened outside, they would remain unmoved. Mo Tianji's expression was unusually calm as he watched all of this unfold. There wasn't even the slightest fluctuation. He softly ordered, "Let the public opinion on Mutsang Land's side increase. Then deliberately create a wave of crazy public opinion." He heavily said, "Complete this within a day." Someone behind him respectfully replied, "Yes." Immediately, that person took out the Tianji Intelligence Department's special communication tool from his spatial ring and solemnly sent out the boss's order. Then he added a special order symbol at the end of the order. This was the first special order that the boss had sent out. A special order that had never been used before. Immediately, the Tianji Intelligence Department in Mo Yun Tian began to work frantically. This was the first time that the boss had sent out a special order. If they didn't execute it properly, there would be big trouble. Without mentioning anything else, the lowest punishment would be immediate expulsion. Then, where would they find such a good job with such a high salary and no risk? The battle continued. Others might not have calculated the exact number of casualties, but Mo Tianji's mind was constantly calculating the number of people on each side. The 8 sides are fighting together. The total number of battles has reached 10. And it's only noon. Before sunset, charge for 300 battles. Mo Tianji lightly said, "Then fight through the night. The next day continue fighting like this. Make sure that all the people participating in the battle are exhausted." This order was immediately passed down. Even Xie Danxiong, who had been waiting at the side, couldn't help but twitch his eyebrows. In the eyes of outsiders, this intense battle was under the command of Xie Danxiong. But in reality, every time they sent out troops, how they fought, what path they took, what tactics they used, they all came from Mo Tianji's hands. This was truly a large-scale battle of attrition. With only 1/10 of the enemy's forces, they were able to create an unimaginably endless tide of attacks. Yu Qi, who clearly had the absolute advantage in terms of military strength, gradually began to feel as if he couldn't cope. The enemy's attacks were endless and strange. Their attack routes were strange and unpredictable. They completely violated the conventional battle routes. Yu Qi, who was calm and orderly at the beginning, gradually became a little flustered. After a while, he actually became overwhelmed. Then when night fell, a numb feeling came from his brain. It seemed to be accompanied by waves of pain. Who is the commander of the enemy? Yu Qi's hair stood up in anger. He felt an unbearable pain. It's definitely not Mu Tsanglan or Xie Danxiong. Motherfucker, is this person crazy? He can actually come up with so many tricks. The generals under his command also frowned and were at a loss of what to do. They couldn't help but admit that the commander of the enemy's army was truly a genius. Even though they were on opposing sides, they couldn't help but admire him. But other than being a genius, he was also a madman. A complete madman. The methods he used were really too crazy. Everyone agreed on one thing. A normal commander would definitely not make the series of decisions he made today. So, this was definitely a madman. Complete and utter insanity that can't be cured. No matter how ingenious and cunning your methods were, the soldiers' stamina would inevitably be depleted if they continued to attack crazily without stopping. Yu Qi's side, from the initial stalemate to the end, was naturally exhausted. But, the soldiers of Heavenly Armament Pavilion were more than twice as tired as the people here. There was absolutely no way they could relax at all. They attacked without pause and without rest, but they were definitely not trying to break out of the encirclement. It was just a simple battle of formations. Even if you were a peerless genius and knew how to use ingenious strategies, the end result would still be death. It was because of this that Yu Hang was so furious. You guys are clearly people who are about to die. Why are you still fighting with your lives on the line? Can't you just wait for death? We still have a lot of glory and wealth to enjoy. Who has the strength to fight with you guys to the death? While commanding, Mo Tianji also paid attention to the dense clouds in the sky. There was one cloud. Although it didn't look different from the other clouds, it didn't move much. If one didn't notice it in a short period of time, one would be able to see its uniqueness after observing it for a long time. Since the direction was set, Mo Tianji didn't pay too much attention. He only occasionally raised his neck and twisted it as if he was exercising. Mo Tianji was already sure that the cloud was different from the other clouds. It was Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun's soul power. Mo Tianji's cold eyes revealed a trace of coldness. Going back to my hometown. I came back early to write the second chapter. If I'm late, I'll do it tomorrow. Chapter 23-24. High up in the sky where Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun's Yuan Tianjia's primordial spirit had transformed into a cloud, there was an equally strange cloud. It was drifting silently and occasionally, it would completely disperse and then gather again. Its shape was ever-changing and it was really no different from an ordinary cloud. The acting skills of this cloud were undoubtedly much better than Yuan Tianjia's. That was the Tribulation Divine Spirit that had transformed into a cloud to monitor Yuan Tianjia's movements from a close distance. It was even secretly absorbing Yuan Tianjia's divine spirit energy. Yuan Tianjia's true cultivation was not below Donghuang Shui Leihan's. Although the Tribulation Divine Spirit had a slight breakthrough recently, it was still far from Yuan Tianjia's. However, purely in terms of the usage of soul energy, the difference between the two was reversed. Yuan Tianjia was far inferior to the Tribulation Divine Spirit. The Tribulation Divine Spirit itself was a soul, and what it cultivated was also a soul body. It specialized in only one aspect, while Yuan Tianjia's divine spirit was inseparable from the physical body. This was the fundamental difference between a living soul and a dead soul. When Yuan Tianjia saw that Mu Tsanglan had taken the initiative to challenge him, and that the battle was so intense, he thought that he had succeeded and began to wantonly absorb the soul energy of this world. But what he never imagined was that the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Above him, there was another expert wantonly absorbing his soul energy. Yuan Tianjia didn't know the truth and was still puzzled. Why didn't Mu Tsanglan and the rest send out those experts today to create a storm to disrupt my absorption of the soul energy? Could it be that they are seriously lacking in manpower and have deployed all of them to the front? That's great. So many people have died below, and the soul energy here is incomparably huge. It's enough for me to recover a lot. I'm so happy. The Tribulation Divine Sense looked down at the Celestial the Arch Divine Sense down below, and it was so excited that its heart was about to explode. If I can absorb all of this pure soul power, then I'll be able to make a breakthrough in my cultivation base very soon. This is really a heaven-sent opportunity. I'm so happy. Mo Tianji, who was high up, calmly gave orders. He went out with all kinds of strange strategies and gradually turned the entire battlefield upside down. It was incomparably chaotic. The sky gradually darkened, and Mo Tianji's orders also started to change. The various teams started to weave in and out of battle. From the battlefield they were in now, they weaved in and out of the battlefield. And before this team had completely retreated, another team had already arrived at this location to engage in battle. This gave the enemy an illusion. We haven't retreated yet and you've sent fresh troops. Our original opponent had gone to rest, but our side didn't get any rest. It was equivalent to a tired army going up against the enemy's fresh army. How could it be any better? This kind of negative feeling of defeat was undoubtedly fatal to an army in the middle of a battle. We clearly have more soldiers than them, so why can they rest but we can't? How do you commanders conduct battles? Don't you care about our lives? His change of heart did not cause the battle to cool down. On the contrary, the battle between the two sides became more and more intense. Before this, the soldiers from both sides were basically from two different camps. Even if they weren't mortal enemies, they could still be considered enemies. At this moment, it was as if they were enemies meeting, and their eyes blazed with hatred. The previous methods of confrontation were mostly limited to the scheming between the politicians and framing each other. It was difficult to have a direct confrontation. Even if no one said anything, they felt that it was not satisfying. Now they had finally reached the point where blood could splatter 5 steps away from their bodies and turn into een. More and more people fell and more people joined in. From intact bodies to broken corpses riddled with holes, it only took the blink of an eye. The accumulated grievances of the past many years, let's settle them all today. This sentence was not said by Mu Tsanglan, nor was it said by Yuqi. It was said by an officer under Yuqi who had been fighting with Mu Tsanglan for many years. In the years of fighting, who knew how many lives of Mu Tsanglan's soldiers were buried under his hands. Even the lives of their family members and grandchildren. However, such a person in such a tragic battle had a calm expression on his face, without the slightest hint of panic. Shwa shwa shwa. After he killed a wooden soldier, he was immediately cut down by the swarm of swords and sabers of more than a dozen opponents. However, there was not much pain on his face. Instead, he revealed a smile that said, "It's finally over." In fact, all along I knew that I was wrong, but I refused to face it. I didn't dare to face it. It turns out that death is not so terrible. It's a pity that I didn't know before. Before he died, he smiled bitterly and begged, "Let me say a few more words before I die." But he said such words. "Yuchi definitely can't do anything big. Marshal Mu's side is right. In fact, I already knew. Yuan Tianji is a demon." In the past, if anyone said this, I would have immediately killed that person. But now, I want to tell you that I actually believed it long ago. It's just that I didn't dare to say it out loud. I was unwilling to say it out loud. If Marshal Mu really wanted to rebel, maybe he would have succeeded hundreds of thousands of years ago. As long as we are old brothers, who doesn't know and understand? But I had no choice. Even if it went against my conscience, even if I was guilty, I still had to persist because Marshal, you saved my mother. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth as he smiled bitterly. My entire family was destroyed when I was young. Of the entire family, only my mother and I managed to survive. My mother suffered all the hardships of the world for me. When my mother was at the brink of death, it was Marshal Yu who saved her. Before my mother died, she told me not to betray Marshal Yu. I had to be loyal to Marshal Yu. So even though I know it is wrong, I still have to wave my blade at you. I'm sorry, brothers. His gaze was unfocused, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth as his body slowly collapsed. No matter if you believe me or not, if you are willing to forgive me, it is not important. Actually, I really want to say, if there is a next life, I want to be brothers with people like you. Do not worry, I will also be loyal. In reality, I have truly been loyal in this life, but the person I am loyal to, ha ha ha. The last grimace disappeared in the wind. His body had already lost its last bit of warmth, turning into a completely cold corpse. The officers and soldiers sighed deeply. In the past, many people hated this person and wanted to kill him as soon as possible. There were also many people who organized people to assassinate him, but they didn't succeed. But now it seemed like there was nothing left. Nothing was important anymore. There was only that sigh left, and his heart was empty. Just as he had said before the battle, the grudges that had accumulated over so many years, it was time to end them all. When the grudges of this life were truly ended, the people who had died might have nothing left. But who could understand the silent emptiness in the hearts of those who were alive? The battle was still going on. Countless Mo Yuntian men were here, spilling their blood freely. In reality, there was no right or wrong at this time. There was only each side, and each master they were loyal to. When they were fighting to the point of forgetting themselves, no one would care if this battle was the so-called battle to slay the Mo. Everyone knew this already, why say more? But this battle was a battle of life and death that had been decided many years ago. They had to fight. They had to fight. They had to fight. The consciousness of a saint was enough to cover the entire battlefield. Many people heard these words. Gu Duxing's gaze dimmed slightly. GMO and the others also sighed because of this. How should I evaluate people like you? I'm really speechless. Xie Danxiong smiled bitterly. The eyes of those sensitive women even turned red. Only Mo Tianji's expression remained unchanged. In fact, it didn't change at all. He even reprimanded everyone's reaction. What's there to sigh about? This is a battlefield. How can there be so many causes and effects? How can there be so many emotions? If you guys have so much time to be sentimental, why don't you put more effort into improving your own cultivation? Those who wave their sabers at me will be killed. Whoever sighs again get lost quickly. Those who are full of emotions should not enter this battlefield. This guy is a ruthless person with a heart of stone. Why didn't I see it before? Rui Badong complained softly. How is this a heart of stone? Mole said lightly, this is the most basic and correct mentality of a qualified commander, a competent strategist who controls the deployment of all the troops. Could it be that when you're facing an enemy of life and death, you'll hold back and not kill him just because he has his own reasons? But at that moment, a moment of hesitation and empathy can lead to your own death. Showing mercy to the enemy is being cruel to yourself and your own people. Since we're on the battlefield, there shouldn't be any empathy, sympathy, pity, or understanding. There's only life or death. Chu Lu said lightly. Everyone was silent. Collectively, they looked at this thin, weak, and timid little girl. Those words just now were actually said by this little girl? Could it be that I'm imagining things? Mo Tianji's face suddenly flushed red. It wasn't because he was shy but because he was excited. He was really too excited. Confident. Perhaps there were countless people in the world who could understand, acknowledge and accept Mo Tianji's words just now. But only Chu Lu's understanding and support could make Mo Tianji so excited. Chapter 23-25. Heavens! What a miracle! Mo Tianji's face turned red. Mo Tianji exclaimed as if he had discovered a new continent. Get lost! Mo Tianji roared ferociously. His voice was full of meaning, but it was not frightening. Instead, it was filled with anger and helplessness. It was rare to see Mo Tianji like this. Everyone immediately laughed. Mo Tianji did not know how to adjust his expression. He could only restore his indifference and continue to command the battle. However, his spirit seemed to be more focused than before. His commands were faster, more concise, and more powerful. It was as if he was trying his best to show how calm he was in command, how he was strategizing, and how competent he was. Mo Tianji's command became even more elusive under the influence of this kind of peacock spreading its tail. In fact, he was even more meticulous in his planning. This made Slow Rain, who was countering every move, even more miserable. After continuously giving out commands, he only felt that he was seeing stars, and it was hard for him to continue. In this extremely passive mode of dealing with the enemy, he needed to see through the enemy's intentions at every step, and then make a targeted response, before finally obtaining the final victory on the battlefield, especially when facing Mo Tianji. For Yu Qiyi, this was really too difficult. In the end, he could no longer keep up with Mo Tianji's pace. On the battlefield, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion was still mobilizing their troops in an orderly manner. On the other hand, Yu Qiyi's side had already sunk into complete chaos. An entire night of fierce fighting was finally over. The Heavenly Armament Pavilion sounded the gong to withdraw their troops. This fierce battle had lasted for an entire day and night. The Heavenly Armament Pavilion had undoubtedly obtained an overwhelming advantage in this high-intensity battle. Mo Tianji had used all kinds of battle formations at the same time, even though the other side had a large number of people. He had used all kinds of battle formations at the same time, and had used them in a crisscross manner. He had used the most advantageous and most effective way to arrange the battle strategy. Moreover, he had forced Yu Qiyi to the point where he could no longer command. He had actually issued the command, "Fight your own battles and act according to the situation." Such an order. It could be seen how much Mo Tianji had suppressed Yu Qiyi. Seeing that Mo Tianji had finally retreated back to the camp, ending the long battle of one day and one night, Yu Long let out a long sigh of relief. He rubbed the veins on his temples that were about to pop out and said, "This madness is finally fucking over." The generals looked at each other, not knowing how to respond. Less than half a cup of tea's time had passed since Yu Jie's words of relief were spoken. His voice was still ringing in their ears. Unexpectedly, the sound of war drums was heard again from Mo Tianji's side. The Heavenly Armament Pavilion once again lined up neatly and attacked from all directions. The battle was still a battle, an almost uninterrupted battle. Yu Qi's bloodshot eyes revealed a look of disbelief. Fuck. Again. Avoid the battle today. Rain shook his head tiredly. No matter if it was a soldier or a general, they could not fight anymore. As for Yu Jiao himself, he had already reached the point where he was completely exhausted. Yu Qi absolutely believed that if he continued to fight with that madman for another day and night, he would most likely die from brain congestion. This order to avoid battle was the most suitable one at the moment. The order was instantly sent out. Hearing that they were avoiding battle today, all the generals and soldiers in the camp heaved a sigh of relief. Facing a battle maniac from head to toe, a lunatic, this was not a good feeling. Marshal Yu had finally made a wise choice. They could finally rest for a while. However, right after the order was sent out, the Sky Emperor's reproach immediately reached Yu Qi's ears. Why are you not going to battle? Avoiding battle? Aren't you destroying the morale of our army? Immediately go to battle. Destroy the enemy as quickly as possible. Yu Qi groaned and was about to go crazy. My God, however, how could he not listen to His Majesty's orders? If he did not listen, that would be a rebellion. However, His Majesty the Sky Emperor's orders were transmitted through telepathy. In other words, only Yu Qi could hear it. And no one else could hear it. The meaning was very clear. His Majesty the Sky Emperor also knew that he could not fight anymore, but he still had to give the order to go to battle. His Majesty could not afford to lose face, so naturally Yu Qi had to be the scapegoat. The messenger had just returned when he received a new order from Yu Qi. Order the 3 armies to immediately go to battle. Hearing this order that changed constantly, the messenger, who had always been clever, was dumbfounded on the spot. This was what it meant to change orders from day to night, wasn't it? No, there was still a whole day's time before the order changed. The time it took to change the order was too short? It changed in the blink of an eye? Are you playing with me? Are you fucking kidding me? Just to make me make an extra trip? At this moment, the messenger looked at Yuchi as if he was looking at a super madman. Your sister, is there a fucking commander like you? You just gave the order not to battle today. It had not even been 15 minutes, okay? You changed your mind as soon as it was passed down. What do you want to do? What are you looking at? Is there something wrong with your little eyes? Yuchi was in a state of extreme depression. He had taken the blame for no reason. How could he not know how stupid his two contradictory orders were? But he could not distinguish them at all. When he saw the messenger's eyes full of doubt, he became even angrier. He was inexplicably indignant. He was so angry that he could not vent his anger. He shouted angrily, "Do you fucking not understand human language? Why aren't you hurrying to pass down the order? Why are you staring at me with your pair of donkey eyes? Is it very big? Fuck. Hurry up and pass down the order." The messenger never thought that this commander not only did not reflect on his erratic behavior, but also scolded him. Who did I offend? Damn it, my legs are about to break from running to pass down the order, and I even got scolded for no reason. What the fuck is this? With a dark expression, the messenger took the flag and walked out for a second time. He had already cursed Yuchi's 8 generations of ancestors in his stomach. Once the second order was passed down, the army camp was filled with complaints in an instant. What the fuck is going on? When I heard that there was no fighting today, I was still happy. Then you give the order to fight again. Fuck, are you going to fight or not? That's right, isn't this fucking playing with us? The fucking higher-ups are just moving their mouths. How would they know whether we are dead or alive? Fuck. They just move their mouths and they dare to say anything. Fuck, I really can't live anymore. If I knew this would happen, I would have gone home to farm. What I hate the most is this kind of erratic behavior. It happened once a few days ago and it happened again today. Is that bastard playing with me? My fucking ancestors. Is he really crazy? They were all soldiers and they were full of complaints. When they scolded people, it was not an ordinary kind of vicious. Naturally, they scolded whatever they could to vent their anger. Unknowingly, Yuan Tianji's order made all of Yuchi's ancestors, regardless of whether they were male or female, suffer great misfortune. They all became tools to vent their desires. Complaints were heard everywhere and the soldiers regrouped to go out to battle. No matter how dissatisfied they were, an order was an order. A soldier's duty was to obey orders. Once an order was given, they had to carry it out no matter how unreliable it was. This was the duty of a soldier and also the fate of a soldier. But it was also the helplessness of a soldier. If they went out to battle with such a mentality, it was easy to imagine what kind of result it would lead to. Moreover, the difference in command level between their own commanders and the enemy's commanders wasn't just a matter of 1 or 2 streets. Instead, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. There was no comparison. Yuchi mobilized 20 million soldiers to attack from 8 sides with the intention of encircling and annihilating the enemy. But he didn't expect that the enemy would only have 4 million soldiers. In fact, they were almost completely defeated and collapsed. The situation on the battlefield was even more tragic. It was bleak and desolate. So, he had no choice but to mobilize those soldiers who were originally skeptical to fight. Although they also didn't have the heart to fight, they were still able to suppress Mo Tianji's crazy attacks by outnumbering the enemy by several times. When the difference in numbers reached a certain number, even the most outstanding strategy and tactics would be difficult to display when the difference in numbers between the two sides was too big. But the defensive strength of Yuchi's camp was finally reduced in this way. It had almost reached an unprecedented level of emptiness. And this was the situation that Mo Tianji urgently needed to see when he launched the all-out attack at all costs. Mo Tianji finally stopped his meticulous command. Meng Wuya took over. He was dressed the same as Mo Tianji. He was dressed in white, and his long hair was fluttering in the wind. He was sitting upright on a high ground and was giving instructions. If one didn't look closely, they wouldn't have noticed that the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's commander had changed. Meng Wuya took over the command. Then he personally experienced the power of Mo Tianji's command in battle. He had some experience when he was watching from the sidelines. But it wasn't as real as experiencing it himself. But he had to assume Mo Tianji's calmness when he stood in this position and took over Mo Tianji's role. It was as if Mo Tianji was in control of the world, and he was calmly giving orders. Meng Wuya sighed from the bottom of his heart. This motherfucker really isn't a job that a human can do. Old Meng has been a commander for dozens of years. I'm confident that I won't lose out to anyone in the world when it comes to leading troops into battle and commanding battles. Right now, I'm just imitating Mo Tianji's style and giving orders. But I'm actually feeling powerless and powerless. There's always someone better than me. Am I Meng Wuya so far behind Mo Tianji? Meng Wuya didn't want to admit it in his heart. But it had only been a short while. And he was already having trouble making ends meet. That young man's way of doing things wasn't something that anyone could imitate. But Mo Tianji had already put down his responsibilities at this moment. His white robe fluttered in the wind as he set off with his brothers. They had already crossed the battlefield. Chapter 23-26. Mu Tsonglan and Yi Luoyue were still fighting with all their might in the sky. The sky was dark and the sun and moon were dark. Both of them were fighting with all their might and the scene was extremely intense. Could be said to be the battle of the century. But for a while neither of them could do anything to the other. The battle between the two of them had already lasted for 2 days and 1 night. Both of them were exhausted physically and mentally, but their fighting spirit was even higher. They would rather die than retreat. The soul of the calamity held the calamity space in its mouth and silently advanced towards Yuan Tianji's imperial tent from high up in the sky. And Chu Yang and the others were hiding in the calamity space at this moment. Below them were the painting and calligraphy kings Mo Yintian and the 2 guards. Using their own methods they gradually advanced and quietly sneaked into the enemy's camp. Although this was a collective sneak attack, the calamity space was still Chu Yang's biggest secret. Therefore he could only send in some of his most trusted people to participate in this operation. As for the others, if the slightest bit of information was leaked, even the current Chu Yang would not be able to bear the consequences. Especially now that the holy sage's attitude was ambiguous and his stance was unclear. If he knew that Chu Yang actually had such a heaven-defying item like the calamity space, it would be equivalent to exposing his strongest trump card in advance. Therefore Chu Yang had no choice. Below them, the painting and calligraphy kings took the lead and quietly entered the enemy's camp like a breeze. They were only discovered by the guards when they were tens of thousands of feet deep. Countless experts began to appear and intercept them. The painting and calligraphy kings were determined and no longer showed any mercy. They went all out and started a massacre. Yao Huangqian's 2 bodyguards followed beside the 2 of them. The 4 of them were like the sharpest arrows as they charged towards Yuan Tianji's camp. Along the way they were thrown off their feet. No one could stop them, not even for a blink of an eye. It must be known that although the cultivation of these 4 people had not reached the level of Di Ho, in the entire Heaven Imperial Court, excluding Di Ho, they were equivalent to the most powerful existence in this world. And Mo Yintian no longer had the so-called 7-star guards. How could he possibly have the power to stop the joint attack of these 4 people? In the blink of an eye, the distance between the 4 of them and Yuan Tianji's tent had already shrunk to within several hundred zhang. Those who were able to guard near the big tent of Yuan Tianji's army could be regarded as Yuan Tianji's confidants. All of them knew that Yuan Tianji's divine soul was still collecting the soul power of the newly deceased in the sky at this moment, and he probably wouldn't come back in a short time. Only his physical body was in the big tent. As long as these people invaded the tent, Yuan Tianji's physical body would be destroyed in an instant. At that time, Yuan Tianji's identity as the heavenly demon would no longer be able to be concealed. Therefore at this moment, everyone was fighting with their lives on the line. Stop them. Protect His Majesty. Yu Qi finally discovered the hidden danger on this side. He roared and took the lead to fly over. In the blink of an eye, a few more rainbows streaked across the sky and rushed over. Before the person arrived, the tyrannical power that could topple mountains and overturn seas had already arrived with a loud rumble. At this moment, no one was even worried about accidentally injuring their own people. They all attacked with all their strength. Even if half of their own soldiers were destroyed under this kind of power, as long as they could stop these 4 people, it would still be a great achievement. Yuan Tianjie, who was high in the sky, also discovered the crisis here. He was also shocked. The power of his divine soul shook and returned at full speed. At the same time, his divine soul also ordered the heavenly demon troops lying in ambush around the big tent to prepare for battle, just in case. These subordinates were all the confidants of Yuan Tianjie's clan who had followed him for many years. The few leaders were the people who had cooperated with Yuan Tianjie to deal with Crazy Book and the others. Their cultivation had also reached the peak of the Saint Realm. It was precisely because of this that Yuan Tianjie didn't let these people step into the battlefield. He only secretly accompanied them to protect himself in case of an emergency. At this moment, this hidden chess piece finally came in handy. Huang Shu let out a fierce roar and transformed into a 5-colored rainbow, forcibly breaking through all obstructions. His eyes were bloodshot as he charged towards the incomparably gorgeous embroidered tent in the middle. It was as if the tent was a palace. The spring and autumn brush in his hand turned into two shocking lightning bolts. They stabbed down fiercely. The surrounding tents immediately flew out in all directions, but they were suppressed by the energy and could no longer stand in place. Seeing the big tent where Yuan Tianjie was, Crazy Book felt as if he saw his wives who had died tragically in the past. At this moment, a million years of resentment broke out at the same time, and he almost lost his mind. Crazy Book's attack was about to completely destroy the whole tent and Yuan Tianjie's body. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. A burst of dense black light suddenly rose, and 8 people appeared from all directions. Each of them threw out a palm, and the combined palm force instantly turned into a tough black light curtain, intercepting Crazy Book's attack head-on. These two powerful forces collided head-on, and a slight ripple sound was heard. All the destructive forces disappeared in this slight sound. And within a radius of 1,000 feet where the two terrifying forces collided, countless black spaces crisscrossed and appeared, as if the whole space suddenly collapsed and shattered at this moment. Crazy Book let out a muffled groan and immediately floated back. But his eyes were wide open and he roared, "It's really you? You finally appeared." The person facing him chuckled and said in a strange voice, "Guard Shu, we meet again. You idiot from a million years ago, Guard Shu was very happy with your job. Why did you betray me at the last moment? The most ridiculous thing in life is not a moment of stupidity, but a generation of stupidity. Guard Shu, you have already been a fool for a generation. Are you just short of these last few days of your life?" Crazy Book roared, "Common beasts. If I don't kill all of you, I am not human." The 8 people laughed together. "You? Dream on." "Me too." Painting King was bathed in blood, and he flew down from the sky. He did not stop and actually attacked with all his strength before Crazy Book. He looked up to the sky and shouted, "Big brother, second brother, we brothers will avenge you today." The 2 great guards of Demon Emperor Heaven had also broken through the layers of obstacles and rushed over. The 4 great guards of the 2 sides joined forces, and their momentum suddenly increased by more than 10 times. The 4 of them did not hesitate and attacked with all their strength. The faces of the 8 people on the other side instantly became incomparably solemn. With a whistling sound, black gas suddenly filled the sky. Thousands of black-clothed and masked people suddenly appeared in the surroundings of this lonely big tent as if they were born out of thin air. After one batch, another batch came, thousands, thousands, thousands. Slowly, this place was actually filled with people. Yuan Tianjie's million years of trustworthy management had already left behind countless hidden sky demon experts by his side, but this time, they surged out violently as if they had emerged from the ground. This was Yuan Tianjie's real army. Moreover, all of them were experts, first-class experts. Even the weakest among them had the cultivation of celestial being. Most of them had reached the peak of celestial being, and there was a small group of dozens of leaders who had the cultivation of saint being. This was undoubtedly an extremely powerful force. These people suddenly appeared, and thousands of them joined forces to face the joint forces of the 4 kings. However, although thousands of people joined forces, they were still not enough. Everyone rolled on the ground at the same time and some of them spat out blood. However, the blood that these people spat out was actually black. As soon as the black blood came into contact with the air, it turned into a cloud of black smoke and flew into the sky. And another group of people did not care about the life and death of their companions, and forcibly came up, blocking the path of the 4 great guards. In the distance, Yu Qi and Mo Yunqian's experts who were madly chasing to protect the emperor saw this situation, and all of them involuntarily stopped in their tracks. Black blood. What was going on? Except for some special poisons, no human would spit out black blood. But now there was no one using poison at all. But these thousands of people were all spitting out black blood. Why was this? The reason was self-evident. Everyone's eyes looked at the Sky Emperor's big tent at the same time, and their eyes were full of suspicion. Even if they were loyal people in the face of this situation, they also understood. If there was no substantial evidence before, then, could this scene in front of them already be considered as evidence? Everyone, don't hesitate, the most important thing now is to protect His Majesty's safety. Yu Qi shouted angrily. His Majesty is all-encompassing, even if he took in a group of extraterrestrial demons as his servants. What's so strange about that? Where did all of you get so many doubts? Could it be that His Majesty's contribution to Mo Yuntian in these million years is not worth a few wisps of smoke? At this moment, The four kings were already fighting with the countless extraterrestrial demon army in front of them. The four of them attacked with all their might, slaughtering large swathes of heavenly demons in an instant. They went on a killing spree. The four of them all remembered Chu Yang's instructions, to do their best to kill all the extraterrestrial demon guards. But the other party had tens of thousands of them, and none of them were mediocre. How could it be easy to kill all of them? The corpses on the ground kept turning into black smoke, but Yuan Tianjie's big tent was still unmoved. At this moment, Yuan Tianjie's divine soul had already rushed to within 10,000 feet. Under full speed movement, no one could see that Yuan Tianjie had returned. At this moment, a young girl in white suddenly appeared in the sky above Yuan Tianjie's big tent. She abruptly waved her hand at the critical moment, and then disappeared again. For some reason Yuan Tianjie's divine soul plunged down just like that. Yuan Tianjie's originally traceless divine soul suddenly emitted a green hazy light, and he howled painfully, saying angrily, "Who used the soul poison? I'm going to kill you." The soul poison was the fiercest and most vicious poison among all poisons in the Heaven Palace Tower. It had always been a taboo poison in the Heaven Imperial Court, and this method had been lost for millions of years. Chapter 23-27. If one wanted to use this poison, apart from the fact that one's cultivation had to at least reach Celestial Being Peak B, one also needed to use one's own soul power as a guide. After using this technique once, the user would not be able to use it a second time within 3 years. The conditions for using this technique were so harsh, so the effects were naturally extremely shocking. Chu Luo was already going all out. Once this poison was used, as long as it was attached to the divine spirit, the attached divine spirit would immediately fester, turning into green smoke and gradually dissipating. It was extremely difficult to get rid of it. However, the target this time was Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun Yuan Tianjie, a heavenly demon king. Even the four great guards in Chu Luo, who had poisoned him, weren't sure if it would work or how effective it would be. But there was one thing that everyone could be sure of now: even if this technique could not kill Yuan Tianjie, at the very least, it would definitely have an effect. It would definitely be effective. Because the effect had already started to take effect. Yuan Tianjie's divine spirit emitted a green light under the effect of the soul poison. Then it emitted even more green smoke, showing that the soul poison was already taking effect. Under this kind of injury, even Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun could not help but spasm a little. With a fierce roar, he stopped flying forward. With a roar, the green light around his body suddenly flourished and then suddenly dissipated. It became invisible and traceless. The world-shocking soul poison actually only had an effect on a super expert like Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun with just a roar from Yuan Tianjie, and a part of his divine spirit power dissipated. The soul poison had already completely lost its effect. Furthermore, this was under the premise that he was originally seriously injured. If his divine spirit had not been injured previously, it would be hard to determine what the result would be today, or even whether it would be effective. Chu Yang and the others couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when they saw this situation. For the first time, they witnessed the true strength of someone at Di's level. He was actually so strong. And right at this moment, the four guards who were fighting on the ground jumped up at the same time, completely ignoring the fact that they were being attacked by tens of thousands of enemies at the same time. They removed all their defenses and turned all their cultivation into one attack. Even their favorite weapons flew out of their hands like shooting stars chasing after the moon, piercing into the green light in the sky. Until now, this was only the first step of Mo Tianjie's demon-slaying plan. Yuan Tianjie's spirit was only one step away from entering the tent and returning to its original position. But at this moment, the joint attack of the four great experts had already arrived without any regard for their own safety. Furthermore, it had completely sealed off any space that could be dodged. However, under the relentless attacks of the heavenly demons, the four experts who had completely given up on defending themselves trembled. Fresh blood flowed from their bodies and pieces of flesh flew into the air. Both of them had used all of their cultivation in a single blow to destroy their souls, causing them to be unable to recover for a short period of time, which meant that they had lost all ability to resist. Let the enemy attack them wantonly, let them be fish on the chopping board. And with so many members of the heavenly devil horde on the ground, which one of them wasn't a veteran who had experienced hundreds of battles? How could he give up such a heaven-sent opportunity to annihilate the enemy? After a single strike, the four of them were almost dismembered by a flurry of blades. However, there was a loud roar in the air. Formless, traceless, and traceless, an awe-inspiring sword ray and an awe-inspiring saber ray fell at the same time, protecting the four experts within the sword qi and saber ray. It was Gu Duxing's sword and Dong Wuxiang's saber. They attacked at the same time. According to Mo Tianji's initial plan, there was no protection of the swords and sabers at all. Instead, the four guards would be sacrificed at this moment. If they could self-destruct, the effect would be even better. This way, it would be more helpful for everyone to focus on attacking Yuan Tianji's spirit. However, at this moment, everyone unanimously chose to help the four guards. Yuan Tianji could be killed again. However, if the four great protectors were to die here, they would die forever. They would never give up on their companions. Faced with such an outcome, Mo Tianji could only sigh helplessly. In fact, everyone didn't know that to destroy the spirit of an expert like Yuan Tianji, who had already reached the peak level, it would only be effective if it was an expert who had also reached the peak level of saint level. And Dong Wuxiang and Gu Duxing's current cultivation hadn't reached that level yet. Even if they forcefully attacked, it wouldn't have any effect. Instead, it would only be a waste of energy. With the protection of the saber and sword, the four experts finally got a chance to catch their breath. In a breath's time, new energy was regenerated. Their bodies emitted a holy white light, and the injuries they suffered earlier were quickly healed. The self-recovery ability of a peak-level saint-level expert could be quite exaggerated. But Yuan Tianji, who was in the air, didn't have such good treatment. The four experts used up almost all of their cultivation to launch a fatal blow, and it was without any tricks. Yuan Tianji's spirit let out a sharp roar, spinning rapidly in the air like a whirlwind wanting to dodge. Although his spirit was strong now, it didn't have any attack power. He could only dodge. But at this moment, the space around him had been sealed off by the four great protectors. Although Yuan Tianji's spiritual energy was stronger than any of the four great protectors, and even though he was in a sealed space, he could still dodge to a certain extent, but there was always a limit. Even after dodging with all his might, he could only barely avoid two of the attacks. The other two attacks, however, were completely undisguised and directly passed through his soul avatar with a loud bang. Then a burst of black smoke rose. Yuan Tianji's divine soul let out an extremely sharp and miserable howl. Suddenly, his entire divine soul broke into pieces and scattered in all directions. At the same time, there was an angry roar in the tent. The whole tent suddenly fell apart. Yuan Tianji, who was wearing a yellow robe, broke through the top of the tent with a murderous aura. He appeared in the air and roared, "A bunch of insects, you have finally angered me." Yuan Tianji's spirit finally returned to his body after being severely injured. However, this attack caused Yuan Tianming to suffer extremely serious injuries. Tribulation spirit was talking in the tribulation space. In terms of spirit power alone with your martial arts, it's useless against a peak spirit like Yuan Tianji. Moreover, Yuan Tianji left his body on his own accord, and his physical body was not destroyed. He has a little foundation left in the depths of his body. So, other than the four experts who can cause considerable damage to him, your attacks won't work at all. If we want to destroy Yuan Tianji completely, we have to start from his physical body. First, we have to destroy his physical body and remove the source of his soul. Then we have to obliterate his soul. That is the right way and the only way. Tribulation Spirit's words made Mo Tianji feel guilty. If everyone really attacked together at all costs just now, they would have directly attacked his spirit. That way it would definitely cause the four experts to sacrifice themselves. If they really did that, it would be an irreparable sacrifice. And it would be a sacrifice that would have no effect at all. But this had nothing to do with Mo Tianji's command. It was because his cultivation was not high enough that he could not see it. However, what made Mo Tianji blame himself even more was that as the strategist of this calamity, all the plans and arrangements had to be meticulous. He and his brother's current strength was actually completely harmless to Yuan Tianji's soul, but he actually didn't know about it at all. Such a major mistake that was serious enough to ruin this operation actually happened to him. If it were not for his brothers being benevolent and saving the four experts, his plan this time could be considered a complete failure. There was nothing wrong with using military tactics, but being completely rational and losing the heart of a benevolent person was not necessarily desirable. Mo Tianji reminded himself of this fact. If that's the case, if we can't completely destroy Yuan Tianji's physical body, then isn't he immortal? Chu Yang frowned. Not really. Tribulation Spirit said, the main reason you can't destroy his spirit is that your own spirit cultivation is not high enough. If your spirit cultivation is similar to Yuan Tianji's, or even higher, it would be easy to destroy his spirit. On the other hand, if your cultivation is not high enough, it is impossible to destroy his spirit. Originally, the spirit is the weakest part of an ordinary cultivator. Even if it is shrouded in sunlight for a long time, there is a possibility of it being damaged. But for Yuan Tianjia's spirit, needless to say, is solidified. What's more frightening is that as a celestial emperor, his luck is really too strong. The divine soul of calamity also said with a wry smile, unless it's an existence like Yuan Tianji, only then can they have the ability to destroy his divine soul. Apart from that, it's easier said than done to kill His Majesty the Celestial Emperor who has enjoyed the fortune of the world for millions of years. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji, and the others smiled bitterly at each other. Similar to Yuan Tianjia? Or perhaps it was someone who was stronger than him. Looking at the entire Heaven Imperial Court, how many people like this could there be? Perhaps 1,000,000 years ago, there wasn't much of a difference between a 7-star guard and a celestial emperor. But 1,000,000 years later, a 7-star guard's cultivation hadn't made much progress. They were only using their own cultivation to protect the destiny of a celestial emperor. And celestial emperors, as the masters of their respective worlds, enjoyed this kind of luck on their bodies. After 1,000,000 years of accumulation, they had already far surpassed it. What could 1,000,000 years of luck achieve? That was something unimaginable. Perhaps, in the Heaven Imperial Court, the only ones who could destroy Yuan Tianjia in a normal state were De and Holy Monarch Solipsism. Finally, Yuan Tianjia's spirit was damaged because of the previous incident. And recently Mo Yuntian's luck is also dissipating. As long as Yuan Tianjia is unable to completely quell the rebellion, it will be difficult for his luck to recover. So now this is the only time you can destroy Yuan Tianjia. Chapter 23-28. And this opportunity is not for a long time. It definitely won't exceed half a year. After half a year, if you still can't completely eliminate Yuan Tianjia, who is in a weakened state, then everything will return to Yuan Tianjia's strongest state. Because Yuan Tianjia can completely rely on his many years of accumulation to reform the 7-star guards. As long as the flow of providence returns to normal, then you won't have the chance to kill him anymore. The soul of calamity grinned and added, I'm talking about us. Because after all, we have 1,000,000 years less of the power of providence than Yuan Tianjia. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Maybe cultivation can be accelerated, but there's absolutely no possibility of it being accelerated when it comes to the accumulation of providence. Below, Yuan Tianjia had already flown down and launched a fierce attack on the 4 guards. And of the tens of thousands of heavenly demon army, half of them disappeared in an instant. The remaining ones also gradually disappeared. Only a few dozen commanders with higher cultivations were still fighting alongside Yuan Tianjia. And, under the illumination of Yuan Tianjia's emperor's light, everywhere he went was filled with divine radiance, majestic and inviolable. As if the demonic aura just now was just an illusion. The majesty of heaven and earth swept across the world. Even the entire battlefield outside was filled with the majestic aura of the emperor's heavenly majesty. Under such a majestic atmosphere, no one would doubt that the heavenly emperor who appeared now was actually a heavenly demon. Yuan Tianjia used the power of providence to create an atmosphere to conceal his true self. The divine spirit saw through it at a glance. We have to attack, now is the time. Following the divine spirit's words, Chu Yang immediately ordered, move out. There was a loud boom. Chu Yang Mo Tianji Gu Duxing Dong Wushang Rui Badong Ao Shiyun Xiadanxiong Gmo Luo Kadi Tan Tan Mo Qingwu Zi Sheching Mo Lei and Brother Hu. They rushed out of the tribulation space together. From the void they suddenly appeared. The moment they attacked, it was a fatal blow. Attack together. Attack together. And the location they chose was the area where the 4 guards were fighting Yuan Tianjia. Because at this time, in order to avoid suspicion, Yuan Tianji had ordered the Sky Demon Army to retreat. In truth, apart from the several dozen commanders, the other members of the Celestial Demon Horde were unable to harm the 4 protectors at all. They were just cannon fodder, and forcefully using their own karmic luck would only consume a large amount of karmic luck. It was not worth it. If they only used the several dozen commanders, their efficiency would undoubtedly be much higher, which was why the entire Celestial Demon Horde had fled. As for the army experts in the distant reign, they had yet to arrive. There was still one breath of time left. Even further away, Yi Luoyue was currently engaged in an earth-shattering battle with Mu Tsanglan. She couldn't even spare a hand. This was their only chance. Moreover, the location and distance that Mo Tianji had chosen to attack were extremely vicious. Mo Tianji was confident. Even if it's a deity. At this moment he was caught off guard. There was absolutely no time to react. because this is the only last chance. If they couldn't grasp this opportunity, this operation would be a failure. Tribulation unification. Sword master heaven and earth. Emotianji let out a shout. One ray of cold light pierces 10,000 feet, so what if we slaughter the entire world? Chuyang roared and took the lead to attack. Tut, tut, tut. At the same time it was also a signal. When the four protectors heard this, they all roared and once again split into four sides, attacking crazily with all their might. They left Yuan Tianjie in the middle. The four of them each dealt with one side, using all their cultivation to force all the celestial demon experts who were currently participating in the encirclement dozens of feet away in an instant. There was only one person within 1,000 feet radius. Yuan Tianjie. Furthermore, there were terrifying attacks coming from all directions. More than 100 saint experts were outside, and tens of millions of troops were fighting for their lives. 4 peak experts were risking their lives. It was all to create a vacuum in their hearts at this moment. Now they had finally succeeded. In the blink of an eye, sword energy swept across the sky. A round sword energy light pillar, bright and dazzling, shot towards Yuan Tianjie. The distance was less than 100 feet. It was Chu Yang, using all his cultivation to unleash the strongest killing intent of the tribulation sword. So what if we slaughter the entire world? He didn't hold back at all. An all-out attack. On the other side, another proud and aloof sword energy activated its own heavenly chi and came over mightily. Gu Duxing's black dragon sword activated the heavenly sword technique, and he and his sword turned into lightning. Even though it was daytime, it illuminated the entire world. A viburnum flower suddenly bloomed in the sky. In a dazzling place, endless killing intent was displayed together. Viburnum flower Xiedanxiong. A huge golden hand, mixed with a majestic aura that could control the entire world, suddenly appeared in the sky. It fiercely slapped down towards Yuan Tianjie. Emo Tianji. This was the first time that Emo Tianji had truly made a move. The commotion caused by this move had left all the brothers in shock. They didn't expect that this guy who liked to talk big on the outside was actually so strong and shocking. Tianwu, a dance of heaven and earth. Her red dress was like a dream, and her red ribbon fluttered in the sky, bringing about a kind of illusory beauty, but also an unusually dense killing intent. Emo Qingwu. Emo Qingwu's lithe and graceful body followed Chu Yang like a shadow. Everywhere she went, the sky and the earth were dyed red. Her delicate body actually didn't use any strength at all, and she simply attached herself to Chu Yang's energy. When Chu Yang advanced, she advanced. When Chu Yang retreated, she retreated. Life and death together. When you advance, I advance. When you retreat, I retreat. When you live, I live. When you die, I die. Amidst two roars, GMO and Luo Kadi, one on the left and one on the right, used the technique of becoming one with the sword and rushed over at high speed. The two people who were only at the level of saints now actually transformed into two long rainbows that could only be transformed by peak-level saints. The next moment, a dragon's roar reverberated in midair, and a phoenix's cry soared into the sky. A dragon and a phoenix, flying like a dragon and dancing like a phoenix, similarly carried a tyrannical power that shook the heavens and earth, and both of them rushed down from the sky at the same time. A black sword shadow, as if wanting to chase back the time that had passed 1,000 years ago, silently rushed into Yuan Tianjie's protective vital energy. Silently, without a trace, without a life. It was Emo Le'er's unparalleled assassination technique. The fastest, however, was another white figure. Zishiqing. A pair of slender jade-like hands blossomed like flowers at this moment, turning into tens of thousands of swords that seemed to have materialized. Every sword had the might of the person, and the sword is one, slashing towards Yuan Tianjie. Condensing chi into swords, 10,000 swords, 10,000 lives. Even Chu Yang was taken aback by such an astonishing power. So this was Big Sister Z's true trump card. In the face of such a large-scale and indiscriminate attack, she believed that even if she gave it her all, she might not be able to withstand it. However, this was a killer move that was filled with killing intent. No matter what, Zishiqing would not use it on herself. Chu Yang finally understood why Zishiqing refused to fulfill her promise even though he had forced her into a disadvantageous position countless times. So that was the truth. Just as Zishiqing was closing in at high speed and unleashing her killing moves to her heart's content, a white shadow flashed in her arms again. Brother who rushed out like lightning, and his small body was attached to Yuan Tianji's body in a flash. Her body was still so petite, but when she opened her mouth, it became as big as a millstone and bit down viciously. In the face of such a peak expert, brother who gave up all his technical attacks, and chose the purest and most primitive instinctive attacks. Returning to the basics, simplifying the complicated. Since technical attacks could not destroy Yuan Tianji's divine spirit, then he would use the purest instinctive attacks. Even if it was just a bite of his flesh, it would also cause Yuan Tianji unbearable pain. Any bit of flesh from Yuan Tianji's body would be a great nourishment for Brother Hu. Finally, the sharpest attack also arrived. A black smoke made a painful hissing sound in the middle, but it wrapped tightly around Yuan Tianji's neck. Tribulation Divine Spirit. Although his cultivation was much weaker than Yuan Tianji's, only Tribulation Divine Spirit could turn into smoke and wrap around him. At this moment, Tribulation Divine Spirit also went all out. How could the backlash of a heavenly emperor be small? Tribulation Sword Master. Tribulation Brother. In this tiny gap that Mo Tianji painstakingly created, he used all of his strength to launch a fatal attack on Heavenly Emperor Mo Yuan Tianjie. At this moment, the sky changed color, and the clouds also dissipated. The entire space suddenly became as dark as ink. Nothing could be seen, and only extreme darkness could be heard. Yuan Tianji, the Heavenly Emperor of Ink Cloud, let out a long roar that shook the world. It also contained the taste of endless pain. Tribulation as one, Sword Master of Heaven and Earth. Although this sentence had never been spread in the Heavenly Imperial Court, this was an unshakable legend. Now Tribulation and Sword Master, each of them had reached the cultivation of saint level and above. Chu Yang, who was the Sword Master, and Gu Duxing, who was the first in Tribulation, had reached the level of saint level. Tribulation as one, under the guidance of Chu Yang's heart, and under Mo Tianji's stars orbiting the heavenly sun, the power of Tribulation and Tribulation were perfectly combined. Although the attacks were launched from different directions, each attack contained the huge power of Tribulation as one whole. The power of this whole body had already perfectly surpassed the power of Tribulation as one. It was another sublimation. Although this kind of power could not be compared to Di's peak cultivation, but, compared to the severely injured Heavenly Emperor of Ink Cloud, Yuan Tianji, it was not inferior. Moreover, there was also Mo Lei, Zi Sheqing, Brother Hu and the rest joining forces. At this moment, even Zi Sheqing, Mo Lei, and the rest who were in the situation felt that the power of these 10 people was perfect and inseparable. No one could interfere. Even gods could not be separated. In the sky, after Yuan Tianji's tragic roar, a pitch-black ball of light suddenly appeared. It surrounded Yuan Tianji's body. The holy, mighty and glorious aura of a moment ago had suddenly turned into an extremely evil aura. Chapter 23-29. As far as the eye could see, that was an extremely special evil aura, as if it wanted to devour. Was like heaven. The darkness that reached the extreme emitted a kind of extreme black luster instead. When the darkness reached the end, it was actually no different from the light. That black halo was like a solid and unbreakable circle, blocking and shielding all the attacks outside the halo. Chu Yang and the rest poured all of their mental and physical strength into this fatal blow, maintaining the rhythm and posture of an all-out attack. Flying down from the sky, the sharp point pointed directly above this halo. All of his explosive power was concentrated on that one point. He persevered, trying to break through the black light circle. However, all the attacks fell into an incomparably strange stalemate at this moment. In that black halo that reached the extreme, one could clearly see an almost transparent figure, currently looking outside the halo with a ferocious face. That was Yuan Tianjie. But the current Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun was no longer that mighty and glorious emperor of the past, full of noble spirit, a monarch of a generation who ruled the world. Instead it was a strange creature that everyone had never seen before, filled with a strange atmosphere. Those streaks of black light that seemed to have condensed into substance were precisely emitted from that strange creature's body continuously. It made him look like a huge hedgehog covered with black light thorns all over his body. His face seemed to be convulsing due to some kind of extreme pain, as if there was something strange that wanted to rush out from under that face. Finally, under the continuous flashing of a ball of black light, that black halo gradually showed signs of breaking. Under the all-out desperate attacks of Chu Yang and the rest, Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun, who suffered heavy injuries to his divine soul time and time again, and also suffered soul poisoning and a great loss of cultivation, finally reached the brink of life and death. Once this last barrier was broken, Yuan Tianjie would die without a doubt. Seeing that the opportunity to determine victory was already in front of him, Chu Yang roared, "Break!" At the same time, without any more words or gestures, All the brothers spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time, all squeezing out the life force in their bodies once again, forcing out the last bit of potential. All in one battle. All in one attack. Brother Tiger roared. The instinctive attack of his main body succeeded. Not only did he bite through the halo, he even bit Yuan Tianji's waist. Black blood instantly overflowed. Yuan Tianji let out another miserable groan. The black halo around him gradually dissipated, and it looked like it was about to completely shatter. If he had been at his peak, he would have simply ignored such an attack and would not have been able to deal any damage. But now he didn't even have half of his peak strength, and his divine soul was even less than a tenth of it. Even the power of providence that he relied on as his last protective barrier had been destroyed, and he was powerless to carry on. Tianji had made all kinds of arrangements before. First, he used the army to draw away Yuan Tianji's main forces. Then he sent out a large number of experts to fight with all their might. Then the 4 7 Stars Guards joined forces to attack. The 4 peak experts attacked Yuan Tianji with all their might. Finally, Yuan Tianji was seriously injured. In the end, Tribulation attacked with all his might, making the ultimate blow that decided the outcome of the battle, because Chu Yang's Tribulation sword had the ability to devour. Layers upon layers of schemes interlocked, pressing forward step by step, finally forcing this insufferably arrogant heavenly emperor Ink Cloud to the brink of life and death. If he still insisted on not revealing his identity, then only death awaited him. If his identity was exposed, then he would also have to accept the tragic fate of being abandoned by everyone. Yuan Tianji was extremely conflicted at this moment. He had painstakingly worked for millions of years and finally he was about to be put to good use. But at this crucial moment he encountered such a thing. Grievance, unwillingness, anger, humiliation, and all kinds of negative emotions welled up in his heart. If he had a choice he would definitely not be willing to reveal his identity. Even if many heavenly demon soldiers had already appeared, which meant that he had already been exposed, Yuan Tianji still had a way to deal with it. Just as Yu Qiqi had said, as a heavenly emperor, how big of a deal was it to subdue some heavenly demon slaves? As long as this matter was over, he could even reverse the situation. He could say that Mu Tsanglan and the others were spreading rumors, and turn this matter into a small matter. But at this moment all of his wishful thinking could not be carried out. Because Yuan Tianji had already realized that if he was conflicted and unwilling to reveal his identity as a heavenly demon and the strength of the heavenly demon's main body, what awaited him was only death. Since he had already made up his mind, there was no more hesitation. Yuan Tianji suddenly roared angrily, "You forced me to do this." With a roar, the wind and clouds suddenly changed. It was clearly a clear blue sky, but suddenly lightning flashed and thunder roared, and the light of dawn disappeared. In the extremely dark black light, Yuan Tianji's facial muscles finally spasmed more and more violently. Suddenly, he roared, and the yellow robe covering his body instantly turned into pieces and flew away. The Tribulation divine soul that had been entangling him suddenly let out a scream, feeling a huge force that was completely irresistible burst out from Yuan Tianji's body. For a moment he had no room to resist at all. Before he could even think, he had already been sent flying far away. 2 extremely strange horns also bulged out from Yuan Tianji's forehead in a daze. With the appearance of these 2 horns, Yuan Tianji's appearance became completely unfamiliar, ferocious and terrifying to the extreme. In the middle of his forehead, a strange sun-like shape also appeared, as if a third eye had appeared, but it was filled with an indescribable evil aura. On his back, 12 bare fleshy wings were spread out on both sides. Yuan Tianji's true body had appeared, so he naturally no longer had any scruples in his actions. He immediately counterattacked. His eyes shot out an extremely evil black light, and he suddenly roared, "Open for me!" With a loud bang, the black light that had already shown cracks before completely exploded in an instant. The violent explosive force rushed out in all directions like a hot knife through butter. Chu Yang and the others all let out a muffled groan and all fell back. Everyone spat out blood and they looked at the monster in front of them in shock. No one had expected that when Yuan Tianji's true body appeared, the power he could exert would actually be so great. In front of them, a monster with fleshy wings, 2 evil horns, 3 eyes, and a body covered in horny scales appeared in the sky. He looked up to the sky and roared, his voice almost shaking the world. "Despicable humans! Despicable reptiles! You forced me to do this! You forced me to do this!" He looked up to the sky and howled. His voice was like the howl of a hungry wolf, and it was filled with extreme anger, You guys laid out layers upon layers of schemes and finally made me reveal my true body. Are you satisfied now? Ah. You despicable humans, since you want to see my true body so much, I'll fulfill your wish. All of you will definitely become the #1 sacrifice for me to show myself. I won't let any of you off. When Chu Yang and the others fell back due to Yuan Tianji's powerful counterattack, Yu Qi led the Mo Yuntian army and just happened to arrive in front of them. At this juncture, as long as they made a move, they could easily snipe the retreating Chu Yang and the others. But at this moment, none of the Mo Yuntian army experts made a move. Everyone looked at Yuan Tianji, who was in the sky in a daze. Their minds were in a mess, filled with anger and shame. It turned out that the emperor was really a heavenly demon. It turned out that we were really helping the heavenly demon to do evil. This thought suddenly filled everyone's heart. It turned out that what Commander Mu said was true. What they did was right. It turned out that not only did we serve the heavenly demon for a lifetime, in the end, we were actually helping the heavenly demon to slaughter our own people, sacrificing the lives of tens of millions of soldiers and generals in vain. Each and every one of us were actually stupid beyond compare, sinners who had gone against the tide of history. If our various actions now were to be recorded in the history books in the future, how would the future generations evaluate us? To put it nicely, we were blinded by the heavenly demon and didn't have the intention to do evil. To put it bluntly, we were helping the heavenly demon to do evil and caused endless trouble. Of course, it could also be that we were willing to be the heavenly demon's false hounds, causing great trouble, deceiving our own people and killing our own people, leaving behind a bad name for millions of years. How could we still raise our heads in Mo Yuntian? The moment Yuan Tianji revealed his heavenly demon true body, the entire battlefield suddenly became dead silent. Heaven and earth were also silent. At this moment, even the soldiers of the two armies who were immersed in the battle also stopped fighting. One by one, they turned their heads and looked over in astonishment. When they saw Yuan Tianji's ferocious demonic behavior, a huge wave of anger rose in everyone's hearts. Heavenly demon. He was really a heavenly demon. Chu Yang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and the sword in his hand flashed again. He floated in the air and said lightly, Yuan Tianji, I want to know your real name. I believe that even in the heavenly demon clan, you are also a person of great status. You don't want us to call you a demon child, right? Yuan Tianji's whole body was filled with black light spreading out. He looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. Since things have come to this and there's no turning back, I might as well let you stupid humans die with understanding. I'm the heavenly demon clan's king of flying demons. Heavenly demon clan's flying demons. Yu Qi's whole body couldn't help but tremble. Her eyes were full of confusion and disbelief, and there were even tears in her eyes. As if in a dream, she murmured in a trembling voice, Your Majesty, are you really a heavenly demon? This can't be real. What? When this sentence came out, everyone who heard it all glared at Yu Qi angrily. Chapter 23:30. Yuan Tianji's eyes flashed with an inexplicable look and he said lightly, Yu Qi, you are loyal to me, this king naturally knows. No matter what my identity is, as long as you are willing to continue to be loyal to me, this king can guarantee that you will still have a meteoric rise in the future and bring glory to the future generations. Even becoming the new emperor of this world is not a difficult thing. As long as you are still willing to be loyal, it is such a simple choice. Yu Qi swallowed and said listlessly, So you really are a heavenly demon? For a moment he seemed to have lost his soul. Yuan Tianji's eyes turned to Chu Yang and the others. He was about to attack when he suddenly heard Yu Qi's heart-wrenching cry. Since you are a heavenly demon, then why did you save my life back then? Yuan Tianji suddenly turned back and looked at Yu Qi. Yu Qi had already become frantic. He roared crazily. His voice was mournful, as if his heart was weeping blood. It was as if his internal organs had long been turned into ashes, turned into powder. That kind of pain. Since you are a heavenly demon, then why did you take me as your disciple? Teach me skills? Since you are a heavenly demon, then since you expelled me from your sect, why did you still stay in the Moyun Sky Army and continue to be loyal to you? Why didn't you just let me die? Wasn't that good? Wasn't it good to let me leave? Why did you lie to me all this time to make me be loyal to you? To be loyal to you, for you, I am willing to do anything. Why? Why are you really a heavenly demon? Yu Qi shouted loudly and questioned loudly. Her voice was filled with pain and contradiction. Tears streamed down his face. The army had always known that Marshal Yu's origins were mysterious, but no one would have thought that Yu Qi was Yuan Tianji's disciple. And Yuan Tianji, other than the master-disciple relationship, had also shown great kindness to Yuqi. Yuan Tianji's eyes looked at Yuqi for a long time. He sighed and said, "It seems that you are not willing to continue to be loyal to me?" "I am willing to be loyal to you." Yuqi suddenly burst into tears. "I am willing to be loyal to you no matter what. But you are a heavenly demon, you are a heavenly demon. How can I continue to be loyal to you?" He trembled and wept bitterly. That was a kind of extreme despair. Yuan Tianjia nodded slowly and said, "Good, good, good." He said "good" 3 times in a row, each word heavier than the previous one. He laughed strangely and said, "Since you've made your choice, your position is clear. Words are like the wind, it's too late to regret. I didn't expect you to betray me in the end. Ah. You humans really deserve to die. None of them should live. All of you deserve to die. Why did you save me when my family was destroyed?" Yu Lai asked painfully, "Why did you save me? As a heavenly demon, how can you be so kind-hearted?" Yuan Qinjie coldly stood in the air and said, "The reason why I saved you? It's very simple. It's because I'm the cause of your family's destruction." "What? What did you say?" Yu Qi suddenly took a step back and staggered. His mouth was wide open as if he was struck by lightning. He looked at Yuan Tianji in disbelief. "Haven't I made myself clear enough? I was the one who killed your father. I was the one who killed your mother." Yuan Tianjia laughed loudly. "Who told them to unintentionally discover that I have heavenly demon qi and become suspicious of my identity? Ah. If I didn't kill them, wouldn't they be a threat to me? As for you, I only wanted a kind of feeling. That's why I chose to accept you as my disciple and taught you martial arts. Later on, I kicked you out because you're not worthy to be my direct disciple. As for letting you come back to be my servant, you must really want to know why all of this is, right?" Yu Qi asked in a daze. "Why? What?" At this moment, his heart was already filled with great shock and disbelief. Everything was turned upside down in an instant. He only felt that he was in a nightmare right now. Everything wasn't real. He actually forgot his sadness and anger. He was just mumbling to himself instinctively. "Because I want this kind of feeling, I killed a person's entire family. He has a blood feud with me, but I want this person to be my servant. The more respectful he is to me without knowing the truth, the more he sings my praises every day, the happier and happier I feel." Ha 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 ha. Yuan Qinji looked up to the sky and laughed. Watching someone serve their greatest enemy wholeheartedly, kneel down and worship him every day, and still enjoy it even after becoming a slave, never getting tired of it, what a great pleasure this is. What an achievement this is. This is my greatest enjoyment, my greatest source of happiness, ha ha ha. Yu Qi, who originally suspected that he was in a nightmare, trembled all over when he heard these words. His turbid and lifeless eyes suddenly regained their sharpness. His entire person sank into a state of near insanity. He muttered, "Is the truth actually like this? Is it really like this?" He suddenly roared, "You despicable person who's worse than a pig or a dog. You inhumane, inhuman demon child. Yuan Tianjia, fuck your old mother. I'm going to kill you, ah." With a violent roar, Yu Qi's entire person flew up and rushed towards Yuan Tianjia's location. At this moment, Yu Qi's entire body actually turned into a stream of light. He didn't even use a weapon. He just rushed out barehanded like this, gritting his teeth and rushing forward without any hesitation. Yu Qi's life, his life's goal, his life's belief, all collapsed with a loud bang at this moment, completely disintegrating. No one stopped him, but everyone knew that apart from death, there was no other path for Yu Qi to take now. Perhaps, dying in Yuan Tianjia's hands in a fighting posture was already the best ending for Yu Qi. Perhaps Yu Qi rushing over was not for revenge, but just to seek a quick death. A very strange expression also flashed through Yuan Tianjia's eyes, but he didn't hesitate at all. Looking at Yu Qi rushing closer, one of his hands suddenly turned into a strange black smoke. He chuckled strangely and said, "You want to slay the demon with just you? You want to be a hero with just you?" The black smoke spread rapidly, and instantly enveloped Yu Qi's entire body. Yuan Qinjia raised his hand and slapped down towards Yu Qi's head. Obviously he intended to kill him and end this karma with one palm. However, the moment it landed, there was a sudden very short pause. That was definitely a pause that shouldn't exist. It was very short, almost undetectable. Just because of that pause, more than 100 palms from Yu Qi, which were almost crazy, all landed on Yuan Tianjia's body during this short pause. Yuan Tianjia let out a strange cry and suddenly spat out a mouthful of black blood. A few cracking sounds came from all over his body, as if a few of his bones were broken because of this. He shouted angrily, "Evil creature!" A palm slapped down. Pah! Yuchi's head exploded into a bloody mist just like that. However, the body that had already lost its head did not stop moving forward. Two legs still flew up and kicked Yuan Tianjia's chest fiercely. Yuan Tianjia roared and punched out immediately, smashing Yuchi's entire body into pieces. Endless bloody mist drifted slowly in the air. The number one person in Mo Yuntian's army, Yuchi, died in Yuan Tianjia's hands just like that. "Ha! You want to kill me? I'll kill you first. Ah ha 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 ha." Amidst the bloody mist, Yuan Tianjia shouted, "Who else dares to come up and die?" His ferocious gaze swept across everyone's faces. Suddenly he laughed strangely. "Anyone else who wants to be a hero will end up like Yuchi, this traitor. Have you all seen it clearly?" At the side, Mo Tianji sighed softly. Chu Yang also sighed softly almost at the same time. GMO asked in surprise, "What's wrong? What's the meaning of this?" Chu Yang and Mo Tianji did not speak, but Gu Duxing, Xie Dan Qiong Ao Xie Yun and the others all revealed thoughtful expressions. Yuan Tianjia killed Yuchi but did not absorb his soul power. Instead he let it drift away. In the eyes of outsiders, Yuchi's death was heroic and righteous. Because he died for the sake of slaying the demon. But, with his strength he really could not cause such great damage to Yuan Tianjia. Even though Yuan Tianjia was already weakened to a certain extent, with Yuchi's strength, he still could not do it. But in reality Yuchi did it miraculously. This was very strange, but Chu Yang and Mo Tianji and the others who were aware of this did not expose it. Yuan Tianjia's identity was exposed. Humans and demons walked different paths. Their standpoints were clear. Saying something about rebellion would be superfluous. But Yuan Tianjia just said it like that. Maybe Yuchi was really disheartened and really rushed up with the idea of dying. He really did not want to live anymore. And Yuan Tianjia did it on purpose. That pause that should not have happened was actually caused by Yuan Tianjia himself. He deliberately let his own disciple injure himself, and then kill his own disciple. He deliberately created such a scene. But he gave up on Yuchi's soul so that he could save a little of his true spirit and enter the cycle of reincarnation and be reborn. He knew that by now his disciple could not live anymore. But he used that last little bit of time to use his identity as a heavenly demon to create a little bit of glory for his disciple after death. A martyr who died for slaying the demon. This was enough to let Yuchi's family stand proudly for a long time to come. Chu Yang sighed softly. Could it be that this inhumane heavenly demon actually also has such feelings? Could it be that demons also have feelings? Chu Yang sighed a little in his heart. Maybe the tragedy of Bookworm and the others was caused by Yuan Tianjia. But was Yuan Tianjia really the one who killed Yuchi's family? Although Yuan Tianjia admitted it himself, Chu Yang did not think so. But Yuchi was already dead. Whether it was true or not, was no longer important. The important thing was, Yuan Tianjia still did something for this younger brother. Even if it was so bitter and desperate. Chapter 23:31. But no matter what the truth was with Yu Linglong's death, everything dissipated. In front of them, there was only one demon-slaying warrior who had fallen because of slaying demons. On the other hand, it also meant that the real demon-slaying war had been ignited and erupted. Do it. Mo Tianji shouted and gave the order decisively. In an instant, a strong wind blew. Zi Sheqing, Brother Tiger, Tribulation's godly soul, Chula, Emole, and the rest all retreated. Only Chu Yang and Tribulation were left. Mo Qingwu stood half a shoulder behind Chu Yang. She was the only woman who had stayed behind. She stood there quietly. Forcing out Yuan Tianjia's true body was only the first goal of the established strategy. It was only the beginning and the real highlight was yet to come. After all, killing Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun in front of everyone and killing a heavenly demon were two completely different things. If he killed the celestial emperor of a world, no matter what the reason, motive, or original intention was, he would still face endless trouble and investigation. Even if Mo Yuntian's local strength couldn't do anything to them, then the combined revenge from Di's level was enough to make them completely scared out of their wits. Since it was someone who could kill Yuan Tianjia, then it was possible for him to kill them too. Under such thinking, Chu Yang and the rest definitely couldn't coexist with Di's descendants, unless one side was completely dead. But now that Yuan Tianjia had revealed his heavenly demon true body, the fact that he was a heavenly demon was already known by many people. To Mo Tianji and the rest this was too advantageous. It meant that they didn't need to have any scruples anymore. The name of this battle had already changed from the destruction of a heavenly emperor to a demon-slaying event, to a heroic feat. If there were still people who wanted to make use of this matter to target Chu Yang and the rest, there was no need for Chu Yang and the rest to fight back. They would probably have been eliminated by the crowd first. However, at this point, the situation of the battle was very different from before. Yuan Qianming's real body had appeared, so he naturally did not have any scruples in doing things. Moreover, his battle strength had greatly recovered, so he was bound to be more difficult to deal with than before. Ordinary human wave tactics were hardly effective against him, and might even have a negative impact. Therefore, everyone except Chu Yang and Tribulation retreated, leaving only Chu Yang and the others to encircle and annihilate the flying demon. Zi Sheqing and the rest knew that Chu Yang, Mo Qingwu, Mo Tianji and the rest were a natural and perfect formation that did not need to be deliberately set up. If they forced themselves to stay here, not only would they not be of help, they would also affect the normal operation of the formation. Therefore, Zi Sheqing and the rest retreated and started a massacre on the heavenly fiend horde that had surged out again. As much as possible, they left empty space for Chu Yang and the others to use for the decisive battle. They must not allow anyone to interfere with this battle, and they must prevent anyone from providing assistance to Yuan Tianjia. In mid-air, Mu Tsanglan and Yi Luoyue were almost at the end of their battle. Yi Luoyue, who was gradually losing her strength, also finally revealed her true form as a heavenly fiend. If not, it would be difficult for her to deal with Mu Tsanglan's desperate attacks. Below, the four guards, Zi Sheqing and Mo Lei, brother Hu Chu Lur and the rest attacked the heavenly fiends that had emerged from Yuan Qianming's boundary. These people vaguely formed a second encirclement with Tribulation as the core. Other than preventing the heavenly fiend horde from assisting Yuan Tianming, they also had the intention of stopping Yuan Tianming from escaping after he broke through Tribulation's encirclement. Tribulation's spirit had just taken a direct hit from Yuan Tianming's explosion and almost lost the ability to fight again. If not for his special physique, his primordial body would have long collapsed and turned into ashes. However, he could only turn into a cloud of gray smoke now, hovering above the battlefield. All the soul energy and spirit bodies of the dead heavenly fiend horde were all absorbed by him. While completely eliminating future troubles, he was also recovering from his injuries and strengthening himself at the same time. In the past, it was only the heavenly fiends who absorbed the souls of the human race. Now that the tables had turned, it was the other party who absorbed the soul energy that dissipated after his death. Tribulation's spirit's injuries were gradually getting better, but when it came to taking the initiative to attack, he was still unable to do so. The generals under Yu Qi's command were all stunned when they saw Yu Qi's tragic death and saw so many heavenly fiends suddenly appearing. Suddenly, someone shouted, "What are you waiting for? Still the undying heavenly fiends. Everyone charge over." Everyone shouted and surrounded them from all directions. Even the experts on Mu Tsanglan's side, together with the soldiers on Yu Qi's side, formed a third encirclement intentionally or unintentionally. The crowd turned into a huge iron bucket-like encirclement, surrounding all the heavenly fiends inside. No matter how many personal grudges and grievances they had before, when facing the heavenly fiends, everyone cast aside their former grudges and stood together against a common enemy. In battle, even if they met their old rivals who they had fought to the death with before, at most they would just laugh awkwardly and say a few harsh words. However, they would still cooperate if they needed to cooperate. No one would indulge the heavenly fiends because of personal grudges. Wang Laosen, you better fucking remember this. Today I saved your life and there will be a day when I will save your life. Heavens. Damn it. Fuck, didn't you just happen to save my life? I will definitely save your life. After this, I will still fight with you tomorrow. I will not rest until you die. Fuck, do you think I will be afraid of you? Qin Wu, you bastard, I will settle the score with you tomorrow for killing my nephew. You want to settle the score with me today? I don't have the time. Let's kill the heavenly fiends first. As for our matters, we will talk about it later. Fuck, how can we be afraid of revenge when we are still alive? Let's make a deal. The second day after we kill all the heavenly fiends will be the time to settle our grudges. Wang Er, you treacherous bastard who doesn't get up early if there are no benefits. You actually know how to save people today. Fuck off, so many heavenly fiends won't be able to shut your stinky mouth. If you have the guts, just you wait. Let's see if I don't set up a trap to kill you one day. The two armies almost merged into each other in an extremely short period of time. There was no grudge between them at all. We don't care about the battle in the sky, but none of these heavenly fiends on the ground can escape. This was the common understanding of everyone. Yuan Qingjie looked at the battlefield below with an extremely complicated gaze. He watched as his heavenly fiend subordinates slowly dwindled and disappeared like bubbles in the sea. He watched with his own eyes as his capable subordinates, who were also saints, were instantly drowned by a large group of experts after revealing their heavenly fiend's true forms. Some people directly used their own bodies as weapons. They gave up on their skillful martial arts moves and used the most barbaric and unskillful method to hold the heavenly fiends tightly. However, they didn't self-destruct because they had more people on their side. If they self-destructed, not only would they hurt the enemy, they would also hurt themselves. Instead, they laughed wildly and allowed their comrades to beat themselves and the immobile heavenly fiends into minced meat. The first Tribulation Sword Master had already set up the battle formation of the Sword Master of the world. He kept accumulating his own strength, preparing for a thunderous attack. The time to kill with one strike had arrived. Mo Tianji carefully looked at Yuan Tianjie's expression and said indifferently, "Lord Flying Demon, do you see it? This is the Heavenly Imperial Court. You want to obtain it for all eternity, but it is a place that you are destined to never be able to obtain. It doesn't matter how many grudges we have against each other, none of us will cower in the face of celestial demons and devils like you. None of us will remember any personal grudges. Not to mention that you have been the Heavenly Emperor for 1,000,000 years, not to mention that you haven't done anything good. Even if you have done millions or tens of millions of good deeds for Mo Yuntian, when your identity is exposed, you will be attacked by everyone. This is not being ungrateful, but it is determined by the nature of you heavenly fiends. Those who are not of our race will be killed." Mo Tianji's voice was very calm, but the words he said were like the sharpest blades, ruthlessly stabbing into Yuan Tianji's heart. The symbol on Yuan Tianji's forehead flickered with a dense black qi, and he said indifferently, "My clan has never thought of taking you humans for our own use. What we want from the beginning is only this space, this place, that's all." He said indifferently, "Everything else is not important. For example, it really doesn't matter how you humans treat us. When the time comes, just kill all of us. It really doesn't matter." "If that is the case, then why were you still sad just now?" Mo Tianji said indifferently, "If that is the case, why didn't you just let Yu Lai's soul be destroyed? If that is the case, why did you not hesitate to hurt yourself to give him the title of a hero after death? Sacrificing yourself for others doesn't seem to be the style of heavenly fiends. Is this not important?" Yuan Qingjie suddenly trembled all over, as if these words had caused an inexplicable pain hidden in his heart. He raised his head and screamed, "Damn it, who are you? I will kill you, I will definitely kill you." Chu Yang stepped out from the crowd and said indifferently, "Yuan Qingjie, allow me to introduce myself here. I'm Chu Yang, the Chu Yang who killed your son Yuan Shetu. Aha, I've always felt that the name Yuan Shetu was a little strange. It turns out that your original intention of naming him was to show that your son and this world were completely different paths from each other. Now, I didn't let you down and send him to the netherworld early. Don't you feel very gratified and self-aware? So it is you." Yuan Qingjie turned his head and stared at Chu Yang. "So you are Chu Yang." Although his voice was still indifferent, it gave people the feeling that he was forcefully suppressing his anger. It was very real. Chu Yang looked at Yuan Qingjie and said, "Even I did not expect that your father would all die in my hands in the end. I wonder if you have this foresight." Chapter 23:32. Whether I'm qualified or not, it's not up to you to say. Chu Yang looked at his sword and said lightly, "You'll know that you're wrong later. It's not scary to not have foresight, but it's scary to lack self-awareness." Yuan Qingjie nodded fiercely. Good. Let's see who doesn't have self-awareness." The way he looked at Chu Yang became more and more ferocious. Almost all of his painstaking efforts had been destroyed because of Chu Yang alone. So, his hatred for Chu Yang was extremely deep. If Chu Yang didn't kill Yuan Shetu that day, why would Yuan Qingjie send people to kill him? If he didn't send people to kill him, why would Meng Wuya betray him? If he didn't do that, why would the conflict between Mu Tsonglan and Yu Qi become so intense? If he didn't do that, why would the three kings go to kill Chu Yang and Meng Wuya? And if it weren't for these things, why would his identity as a heavenly demon be exposed after he successfully hid it for 1,000,000 years? Thinking of this, Yuan Tianji suddenly realized that the reason why his 1,000,000-year hibernation, the 1,000,000-year painstaking effort of the Heavenly Devil clan, was exposed was entirely because of Chu Yang alone. This guy was the fuse that ran through the entire situation. Chu Yang, if this king were to let you die a quick and painless death, it would be letting down your self-awareness. Yuan Qingjie put his hands behind his back and glared at Chu Yang. Chu Yang nodded slowly. Same here. Yuan Qingjie screamed without warning. The 12 fleshy wings on his back suddenly spread open, and he flew into the air. As fast as lightning, he almost turned into a green light. His target was Chu Yang. Mo Tianji ordered. Gu Du Xing sword, Dong Wushang saber, Xia Dan Xiong's viburnum flower, Mo Qing Wu's gentle dance dream, Ao Xie Yun's golden dragon divine technique, Rui Butong's golden phoenix, GMO and Luo Kudi's swords, and Mo Tianji's palms all pushed out at the same time. The one shining with sharp sword light was Chu Yang's calamity sword. The 10 of them completely turned into an indestructible sharp all at this moment. They attacked Yuan Qingjie head-on. Yuan Qingjie's roar shook the sky. He didn't dodge at all. His 2 hands turned into black smoke and chopped down fiercely. Yuan Qingjie actually wanted to use his heavily injured body to take on the power of tribulation head-on. This action showed Yuan Tianming's determination to fight to the death. To be honest, Yuan Tianji's action was somewhat out of Mo Tianji's expectations. In Mo Tianji's estimation, Yuan Tianjie would most likely use the method of attacking tribulation separately, avoiding the strong and attacking the weak. If that was the case, Rui Badong, GMO, and Luo Kadi, who were relatively weaker, and Mo Qingwu, who was a woman, would most likely become Yuan Tianjie's primary targets. But now Yuan Tianjie actually chose to attack head-on. This was undoubtedly beyond Mo Tianji's expectations. However, this was even better. This was because the current situation was what Mo Tianji wanted to see after all his plans, schemes, arrangements, and attacks. In fact, Chu Yang's previous series of provocative words, even using himself as bait to lure Yuan Tianming into attacking him, was all for the sake of complementing Mo Tianji's plan. He didn't know if it was because a certain king of hell's poisonous tongue was too incisive that he actually attracted Yuan Tianming's full attention. The reason why such a tactic was formulated was because if Yuan Tianjie really wanted to escape, with his tyrannical cultivation, even if tens of millions of soldiers gathered here, they definitely wouldn't be able to stop him. But as long as he was determined to fight to the death, then everything would be easy to deal with. Forcing Yuan Tianjie to the point where he had no choice but to personally lead the army before he recovered from his injuries was the most praiseworthy thing that Mo Tianji thought Xie Dan Xiong had done. Mo Tianji thought that this was a good foundation, and it was a great foundation that was bestowed by the heavens. After that, he continued to attack and destroy, so that Yuan Tianjie's injuries would never have the chance to recover. This continued all the way. Finally, there was the thunderous attack that made things worse for the 4 great guards. What Mo Tianji didn't expect the most was that Yuan Tianjie was actually willing to get injured again for Yu Qi. This could be considered a completely unexpected gain. After that, Mo Tianji's words were equivalent to forcing Yuan Tianjie into a dead end. This was a common mentality that belonged to all living creatures. Whether the target was a heavenly demon or a human, it was the same. No matter whether Yuan Tianjie was a heavenly demon or not, no matter whether he had ulterior motives, he had always worked hard in Mo Yin Tian for millions of years. Seeing the people that he had governed for millions of years finally turn against him, this feeling was always unpleasant. Yu Qi was willing to be loyal to Yuan Tianjie, even to death, but she wasn't willing to be loyal to Yuan Tianjie who had revealed his heavenly demon true body. She didn't hesitate to fight with her life. In the blink of an eye, the soldiers who had obeyed his orders had all turned against him. This was a feeling of being betrayed by his own people. Just because she was a heavenly demon? Mo Tianji's words were like knives, riddling Yuan Tianjie's heart with holes step by step. And at such a crucial moment, Chu Yang, the main culprit, jumped out again. A series of more deliberate and vicious words completely broke through Yuan Tianjie's last psychological defense. This allowed the old and new hatred to completely rush into Yuan Tianjie's heart and take root. Mo Tianji's strategy could be said to be completely successful. However, although he left Yuan Tianjie behind, it also brought great danger to himself and the others. Although the 4 great guards still had a certain amount of fighting power, they were all seriously injured without exception. Moreover, even if they weren't injured, rashly entering the core of the battle would also disrupt and destroy the overall power of tribulation. This battle was destined to end with tribulation. Yuan Tianjie didn't back down at all. With the momentum of a thunderbolt, he came crashing down. The tip of Chu Yang's sword also met it at that moment. Boom. The combined power of 10 people collided head-on with Yuan Tianjie's fist. 2 equally ferocious and tyrannical forces collided with each other without any tricks and without any deviation. Humph! Yuan Tianjie let out a muffled snort and staggered backward. Every step he took out, a huge pit would appear on the ground 1,000 feet below. He retreated 17 steps before he regained his balance. His ferocious eyes stared straight ahead. Puff, puff, puff. On Tribulation's side, 10 people's bodies were thrown up at the same time. All of them spat out blood and flew out in 10 different directions. However, their combined auras were still closely connected and didn't separate at all. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji still exchanged glances at the critical moment. Both of them felt a sense of shock in each other's eyes, as well as a sense of relief. They were shocked because although Yuan Tianjia was already seriously injured to such an extent, he actually still had the strength to fight head-on with Tribulation and use his increased strength to force him back. As for relief, it was because after all, he still hadn't really broken through the combined forces of his brothers. In this way he had more confidence in himself. After retreating, Chu Yang didn't wait for his momentum to dissipate. He already somersaulted in the air and rushed back like lightning. As he somersaulted, Mo Qingwu also somersaulted lightly and rushed back with Chu Yang almost at the same time. At this moment, it was as if she didn't have the ability to make her own decisions at all. She just moved according to Chu Yang's movements. At this moment, other than using her own heavenly dance divine technique, all her cultivation, including her spirit, was integrated into Chu Yang's cultivation. In life and death they would never leave each other. In this life, although the two of them had never engaged in any kind of dual cultivation between a man and a woman, at this moment, when their hearts and minds were in sync, what they displayed was the highest level of dual cultivation that very few people could achieve. In life and death they would always be one heart. Black clothes like ink, red clothes like clouds. Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu became one and chased after them at high speed. Yuan Tianjia's eyes revealed a trace of sincere viciousness. He suddenly roared, "Ice sealing heaven and earth." The rich heavenly demonic energy that flowed out from his body suddenly turned into a bone-piercing cold wind. In just a moment, the whole world seemed to be completely frozen by this bone-piercing cold wind. As far as the eye could see, a layer of white frost solidified on the ground in an instant. Then it transformed into a field of ice. In the next moment, the whole ground suddenly cracked open. On the ground, there were many people who unknowingly got close to the battle. Whether they were heavenly demons or humans, their whole bodies were frozen at the same time. Then they shattered with a crash. Even their flesh didn't fall, leaving only hard particles on the ground. It actually completely froze the human body from the inside out, turning them into broken glass. This was already the most extreme cold between heaven and earth. This was because almost every single one of the people who had died in this cold was an expert. But in the face of such bitter cold, they didn't even have the slightest bit of resistance. No one knew who was the first to shout, "It's dangerous here, run quickly." Everyone who got close to this circle ran out quickly. They didn't even dare to fly. Because even the air and water vapor in the air had already condensed because of it. Flying forward and coming into contact with it was practically like flying over a mountain of knives. Most likely before they could fly out they would turn into eerie white bones. On the ground, countless huge cracks continued to spread outwards and new cracks kept appearing. Such a scene was really beyond the knowledge of everyone present. Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu's rapidly flying bodies were suddenly frozen in midair. They didn't move at all. Yuan Tianjia retracted his hand and walked forward step by step. He said with a hideous smile, "In my life what I hate the most is the so-called loving couple. What I hate the most is the bullshit true love in the human world. Every time I see it, I always have an urge to destroy it, and you two are exactly what I hate the most." Chapter 23:33. Destroying all the beautiful things in the world, filling my eyes and ears with the human world. Desolation, that is my greatest enjoyment. Chu Yang, look at this little girl's deep affection for you. If this beauty of yours were to die, wouldn't you be very happy? Ah, I'll let you have a good time first. Yuan Tianjia laughed sinisterly. With a flip of his wrist, a long sword as black as ink, still emitting demonic aura, suddenly appeared. With a swing of the sword it flew towards Chu Yang. The tip of the sword was pointed at Mo Qingwu's neck, which was already sealed in ice. The black long sword flashed and arrived. The Tribulation brothers were frozen in midair. It seemed that they were already powerless against this sword. Chu Yang looked coldly at Yuan Tianjia who was rushing towards him. His body, which had already seemed to be frozen, actually moved strangely. He said lightly, "You want to kill all the people I care about the most. You don't have the qualifications to do so." With a long howl, the Calamity sword instantly emitted tens of thousands of rays of light. With a puff, Yuan Tianji's ink-colored sword was struck down and turned into a cloud of smoke. At the same time, all the ice power that filled the space was completely disintegrated. The next moment, a cold light rushed straight towards Yuan Tianjia. Yuan Tianjia hurriedly dodged, and a piece of his sleeve, together with a piece of flesh, was cut off from his body. But he didn't seem to feel it. He just stared at Chu Yang in disbelief. How can this be? I only managed to activate the icebound heaven and earth with the Heavenly Emperor's providence and the full strength of my demonic soul. As long as it's powerful enough, it can seal heaven and earth. You're just a mere high-level saint. How can you not be affected by my Heavenly Emperor's icebound heaven and earth, and even counterattack immediately? I'll answer this question for you. A cold voice said mockingly, because your icebound heaven and earth is just a joke in front of us. It's just child's play. With this sentence, the originally motionless Gu Duxing had already flown rapidly to the sky above Yuan Tianjia. The black dragon sword in his hand turned into a condensed cold light, stabbing straight down. Why are all of you not affected? This is impossible. Yuan Tianming was furious. He accurately punched the tip of Gu Duxing's sword. While Gu Duxing spat out blood and retreated, on the other side, Dong Wuxiang had already leaped to the top of Yuan Tianming's head and ruthlessly chopped down with his saber. Dong Wuxiang didn't say a single word, but this saber strike was extremely domineering. Its might was even above Gu Duxing's sword strike earlier. At practically the exact same moment, GMO Luo Kadi and the others swarmed over and attacked Yuan Tianming. Xia Danxiong's viburnum flower finally bloomed on Yuan Tianjia's back, and a cloud of black blood flew up. Mo Tianji finally heaved a sigh of relief. He thought in his heart, I finally forced out this move. The outcome had been decided. Mo Tianji had already learned about this killing move from Mu Tsanglan. Yuan Tianji had a type of martial art that could freeze the heavens and earth in an instant. Once it was used, all enemies would be sealed in ice. They would no longer have the power to fight back and would be slaughtered. Even De Empress would be affected to a certain extent. However, if it wasn't a critical moment, Yuan Tianming would definitely not use it, because this move consumed too much energy. When he heard this, Mo Tianji already had a plan. Because only Chu Yang's Calamity Sword could easily get rid of this strange situation. The Calamity Sword was the #1 divine weapon in the world. Whether it was ice or fire, it would not be able to withstand a single blow from the Calamity Sword. No matter what kind of strange martial art it was, as long as the Calamity Sword was present, it would all be dissolved. Mo Tianji had seen this point more than once. And in battle, Chu Yang and the others' cultivations and divine souls were tightly connected, forming a complete body. As long as Chu Yang himself was not affected, it meant that none of the brothers would be affected. And this was the final step of Mo Tianji's demon-slaying plan. And also the most crucial step. Yuan Tianming had already used all his strength to use this killing move, but it did not have any effect. Apart from the psychological blow, his physical condition was bound to be even worse. Yuan Tianjia was confident that his sure-kill attack was easily neutralized by the enemy. Moreover, even when the other party attacked him again, he still didn't understand what was going on. This was a nightmare for Yuan Tianming. It had never happened before. One must know that this move had always been Yuan Tianjia's trump card. He had full confidence that even if it was Shui Leihan, as long as he faced this move head-on, Shui Leihan would also be completely suppressed by him for a certain period of time. Only when nearly half of the frozen heaven and earth's freezing power had dissipated would this restriction gradually disappear. As for those below Jun Ho's level, including the super-strong 7-star guards, they would have to wait until at least 70% of the frozen heaven and earth's power had dissipated. Only then would they have a chance to escape from the frozen heaven and earth's frozen state. Chu Yang and the others, whose strength was much weaker than Jun Ho's, basically had no chance of escaping by themselves. He had even made up his mind, once I release this move it will work instantly. I will freeze all these hateful ants in front of me. I will certainly keep my promise and kill this beautiful little girl in red first. Then I will kill those people next to her one by one. They are Chu Yang's brothers. Just like that. He would only leave Chu Yang alive and would not even harm a single hair on him. Then he would float away and find a chance to slowly toy with Chu Yang in the future. With his cultivation, he could definitely reach Demon Emperor Heaven silently and crush Chu Yang's heavenly armament pavilion. He would toy with Chu Yang all the way until the last moment and only kill him after his mind had completely collapsed. To Yuan Tianming, this was the happiest and most thorough method of revenge. He believed that this Chu Yang would slowly be toyed to death by him. Only then would he be able to vent the anger that had been pent up in his heart all this time. This was the best punishment for the main culprit, but he had never imagined that the result would be like this. His ultimate move, which was enough to threaten the Eastern Sovereign and was enough to restrain everyone under the First Empress June, was completely ineffective against these ants in front of him. At this moment his entire body's cultivation had been depleted, and there wasn't much left. But the other party had actually launched a powerful counterattack at this delicate moment. Wasn't this a little too tragic? Yuan Qianming's heart was extremely miserable, but he also understood that this was a dangerous battle. The other party was about to kill him. If he still thought about such trivial things, he would be courting death. He hurriedly collected his thoughts and focused on resisting the other party's successive killing moves. In just one move he went from being evenly matched and even having a slight advantage to being completely at a disadvantage. Yuan Qianming's cultivation was now less than 100%. He was almost out of energy, but he still mustered all his remaining strength to resist the attacks. Yuan Qianming's million years of battle experience was easy at first. Although he was completely at a disadvantage, he still tried his best to contend. First, he blasted out a palm to shake off the momentum of Chu Yang's tribulation sword, and avoided it by a hair's breadth. Then he used all his remaining strength to forcefully push away Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang, who had the strongest killing power. Chu Yang and the other two people's joint attacks were actually unable to seriously injure Yuan Tianming at this moment. Yuan Tianming barely managed to deal with the attacks of Chu Yang and the other two experts, and his heart relaxed a little. Chu Yang and the other two were the three strongest people on the enemy's side. He barely managed to deal with them and he would have a chance to recover. Unexpectedly, just as he thought this, an inexplicable pain came rapidly from his body. It was Xie Danxiong's viburnum flower that had silently bloomed on his body. Yuan Tianming clearly felt that intense physical pain. This was a pain that he had never experienced in tens of thousands of years. Even if he had been injured repeatedly before, it was only mental damage and spiritual damage. Speaking of physical damage, this was the first time he had experienced it. Yuan Tianji roared in pain and soared into the sky. However, GMO Luo Kadi Rue Badong and Ao Shiyun chased after him like a shadow. While he was in midair, Mo's sword actually slipped out of his hand. Whoosh! I only need a little bit of time to catch my breath. As long as I can catch my breath, I will be able to crush all of these ants into powder. I will be able to escape unhurriedly. I only need a little bit of time, that's all. Yuan Tianming's heart was screaming crazily at this moment. He had never imagined that he would fall into such a miserable state one day. Just as he thought of this, he felt a pain on his back. A sword had fiercely pierced through his back. Although he was suddenly injured, Yuan Tianming's state of mind was not disturbed. With a loud shout, his body spun rapidly. The long sword that had just pierced through his body was only halfway in when the whole sword had already turned into powder. However, even if it was only halfway in, it had already pierced through his body. Right at the place where the long sword had turned into powder, a fountain of black blood gushed out. It had only gushed out for a moment, and then it had already turned into a pervasive black smoke. The bloody hole that had been pierced through there had already been repaired. No matter how much one's origin energy had been consumed, that unimaginably fast recovery speed had already become a kind of instinct. Even in such a situation, Yuan Tianming was still extremely difficult to kill. However, when Luo Kadi Rue Badong and Ao Shiyun saw that Mo's move was effective, they all followed suit. 3 long swords were mixed with all of their cultivation and flew out of their hands. Like meteors chasing after the moon, they pierced towards Yuan Tianming. As the battle continued, at this moment, all the combatants were already high up in the sky. There was nothing around them that could block their line of sight. Below, almost everyone was stretching their necks to watch all the movements in the sky. They watched as Yuan Tianming rose up step by step, and the Tribulation brothers did their best to chase after him, not giving Yuan Tianming any time to catch his breath. At this moment, everyone's heart was beating like a drum. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Everyone was extremely nervous. The moment of victory or defeat might be decided at this moment, or perhaps at the next moment. 3 swords flew over in a crisscross. Yuan Tianming roared furiously. With a kick, 2 swords were kicked far away by him. With just a buzz, they had already turned into meteors in the sky. However, Ao Shiyun's golden dragon sword pierced into his thigh like lightning. Chapter 23:34. This time he didn't fake his life at all. The damage caused was incomparable to Mo's half-pierced sword. Although it wasn't a vital point, the injury was more severe. Yuan Qingjie screamed loudly and spat out a large amount of black gas. He reached out and pulled out the golden dragon sword, breaking it into two with a crack. But this little bit of delay was enough. Chu Yang once again attacked with his sword. A beautiful red silk arrived first like a flying immortal. It fluttered in the air for hundreds of feet and wrapped around Yuan Tianjie's neck with extreme precision. It twisted fiercely. Yuan Tianjie's eyes widened, and the black gas around his body shook violently. That red silk instantly turned into fine powder with a bang. The owner of the red silk, Mo Qinggu, also spat out a mouthful of blood and was on the verge of collapse. But Chu Yang's calamity sword had already pierced into Yuan Tianjie's chest. The unique devouring power of the calamity sword was immediately activated. Yuan Tianjie used his strength to break the red silk around his neck. He was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when he suddenly screamed, "What sword is this? What sword is this?" His scream was actually filled with unprecedented fear. A palm hit Chu Yang's chest with a bang. Chu Yang's hand pulled out the calamity sword from Yuan Tianjie's body. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was thrown far away. A saber fell from the sky. It was Dong Wuxiang holding the saber with both hands. He slashed down fiercely and there was no return. With a chi sound, this blade hacked down with extreme speed, but it hacked down fiercely from Yuan Tianjie's left shoulder, all the way to his waist, practically cleaving this heavenly emperor ink cloud into two halves. But when the black saber slashed down on Yuan Tianjie's internal organs, it suddenly encountered an extremely strong resistance. It couldn't go down even an inch. Yuan Tianjie shouted loudly and suddenly kicked Dong Wuxiang's chest. With a crack, Dong Wuxiang's chest caved in completely. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell from the sky powerlessly. Yuan Tianjie reached out his right hand and touched the hilt of the black saber that was still embedded in his body. His face was filled with indescribable pain. Without waiting for Yuan Tianjie to pull out the hilt of the black saber, another beam of sword light had already arrived. With a schwa sound, Yuan Tianjie's right hand, which had just touched the hilt of his sword, was chopped off by that sword. Yuan Tianjie, who was in extreme pain, suddenly leaned to the side, his shoulders slamming into the person's chest. Gu Duxing. Cloudy Heaven Sword. Gu Duxing let out a furious roar. He simply didn't care about how many bones in his chest had already been shattered by Yuan Tianjie's attack. He actually seized the opportunity to step on the handle of Dong Wuxiang's dark saber before he was sent flying by the powerful recoil, and stomped down forcefully. At this moment, the black saber was still stuck in Yuan Tianjie's body. The sound of flesh rubbing against each other could be heard, but it only lasted for a brief moment. Boom. Although Gu Duxing gave it his all, he only had time to exert a little bit of strength. Yuan Tianjie's counterforce had already sent him flying out, and he had completely lost his ability to move. However, the black saber continued to slash down 3 inches even though it was only for a moment. At this moment, it had already struck Yuan Tianjie's thoracic vertebra. In fact, the tip of the blade had already sunk in. Just a little bit more and it would have broken Yuan Tianjie's thoracic vertebra. Luo Kadi, Rui Badong and Ao Shiyun rushed up at the same time. They surrounded Yuan Tianjie, who was howling in agony, and pounced on him fiercely. For a moment, countless punches and kicks landed on Yuan Tianjie's face and body in a disorderly manner, but without any fakeness at all. Yuan Tianjie passively dealt with the attacks coming from all directions, but his main focus was still on the black saber. He still wanted to pull the black saber out of his body. The black saber that was stuck in his chest was Yuan Tianjie's greatest worry. If it couldn't be removed, how could he talk about recovering his body? Ao Shiyun suddenly stretched out his right hand in the middle of the battle. It actually turned into a huge dragon claw and grabbed Yuan Tianjie's head fiercely. Yuan Tianjie roared and kicked Ao Shiyun into the distance. However, Rui Badong had already spun himself like a windmill. In the nick of time, he kicked fiercely into Yuan Tianjie's stomach. Yes, he kicked directly into Yuan Tianjie's stomach. His whole foot passed through Yuan Tianjie's skin and flesh, and along the gap cut open by the black saber, it directly kicked Yuan Tianjie's internal organs. Yuan Tianjie screamed desperately. His left hand that had already been split open actually turned into smoke, slowly curling down and grabbing Rui Budong's foot tightly. His right hand, which already had no palm, smashed onto Rui Budong's face like a huge hammer. Every time it smashed, Rui Budong would let out a scream. But at the same time, Yuan Tianjie also let out a scream. His hand had already been chopped off, and there was no time for it to regrow. He could only use his pale white bones to smash onto Rui Budong's face. How could it not hurt? The people below trembled all over when they saw this scene. When had they ever seen such a tragic battle in this generation? Yuan Tianji had already smashed Rui Budong more than a dozen times in an instant. Rui Budong's foot was grabbed by the other party, and he couldn't escape at all. His whole head was smashed like a rotten persimmon. His brain was splattered. A flower bloomed in front of Yuan Tianji's eyes like a dream. Bang! Viburnum flower. Countless petals drilled into Yuan Tianji's face at the same time like ghosts, and then they exploded. Under the intense pain, Yuan Tianji's left hand finally let go of Rui Budong's foot. He covered his face with his hand and screamed miserably. Chu Yang roared. Blood was still spurting out of his mouth, but the tribulation sword in his hand had already turned into flowing light again. The tribulation sword was used again. What harm is there in slaughtering the whole world? The tribulation sword and the sword collided with Dong Wuxiang's black saber with incomparable precision. First there was a crisp bang. Then there was a crack. Yuan Tianji's spine was finally cut in half. Under the strong momentum bestowed by the tribulation sword, the black saber, with a fierce driving force, pushed through Yuan Tianji's waist like a hot knife through butter. Half of his body fell straight down from the sky. Below, Mo Tianji spread out his two hands, which turned into two huge hands with a radius of 1,000 feet, and slapped down fiercely. The lower half of Yuan Tianji's body that fell down, along with his 2 feet, bones and flesh, instantly turned into minced meat. Yuan Tianji's demonic bones were smashed into pieces. However, Mo Tianji's 2 palms also turned into minced meat under this blow. Yuan Tianji's bones were really hard to the extreme. Even though Mo Tianji destroyed them with one strike, the rebound power of the bones that had already lost the support of life force still shattered Mo Tianji's hands into pieces. However, Mo Tianji's blow still destroyed more than half of Yuan Tianji's soul in the end. 2 feet, 1 left hand, and the entire lower half of his body were all smashed into a mist of blood. The moment the lower half of his body was completely smashed, Yuan Tianji seemed to have felt it. He looked up to the sky and howled miserably, extremely mournfully. However, at this moment, Chu Yang controlled the tribulation sword and ruthlessly stabbed into the remaining half of Yuan Tianji's body. From the front, he pushed the remaining half of Yuan Tianji's body 1,000 feet away. Although Yuan Tianji's entire lower half of his body was chopped off, his internal organs actually didn't fall out because of this. Instead, there was a layer of thick black gas that held them in place. However, at this moment, even if he could still hold on and not die, he had lost any power to fight back. Facing Chu Yang's fierce and crazy attacks, Yuan Tianji suddenly roared. At this moment, his neck suddenly elongated. He opened his mouth, and his white teeth ruthlessly bit towards Chu Yang's throat. Yuan Tianji's limbs were crippled, and his body was incomplete. He didn't have the strength to fight back, but he still refused to admit defeat. He actually fought back with his teeth. His fighting spirit was really terrifying. Unfortunately, this final counterattack was still meaningless. With a wave of his left hand, Chu Yang had already taken out a large piece of star iron from the tribulation space. He ruthlessly slapped it on Yuan Tianji's mouth and stuffed it into it. Yuan Tianji painfully shook his head. With a loud explosion, the star iron in his mouth was actually forcefully spat out and ruthlessly smashed into Chu Yang's face. Chu Yang didn't care about this change. He let out a loud cry. It was truly heart-wrenching. And under Yuan Tianji's body, after this torment, the broken wound started to drip black blood again. After Luo Kadi retreated, he turned into a shooting star and rushed towards the wound under Yuan Tianji's body with his sword. From the wound, the tip of the sword rushed in like a poisonous dragon. Even half of Luo Kadi's upper body also drilled into Yuan Tianji's body together. With a muffled roar, Luo Kadi's lower body was constantly spinning. The extremely sharp sword spun fiercely, crushing the internal organs that Yuan Tianji had been carefully guarding all along. Countless pieces of flesh and blood turned into cow hair in the air and fell down like fine rain. With another bang, Yuan Tianji's body actually exploded in the air. The 12 flesh wings on his back slowly fell from the air. It was GMO who came over on his sword and crushed those 12 flesh wings in the air. Only then did Luo Kadi's entire body come out from Yuan Tianji's chest. He was covered in blood. The heavenly emperor of ink cloud's entire body was gone at this moment. Only his head was left. But he actually still didn't die. A pair of angry eyes stared fiercely at Chu Yang. A strange voice was still shouting, "Chu Yang, I won't spare you. I definitely won't let you off." Chu Yang snorted coldly. One ray of cold light pierced 10,000 fathoms. With a few poof sounds, the tip of the sword poured down like a rainstorm, all landing on Yuan Tianji's head. His 2 eyes were first pierced blind. Then, his entire head was chopped into pieces by the sword. Finally, it completely disappeared. At this point, the heavenly emperor of Ink Cloud, Yuan Tianji, was finally dead. Only until now did the millions of people watching the battle below finally breathe a sigh of relief. It turned out that heavenly demons were actually so hard to kill. Already killed to the point where only his head was left, he actually still didn't die? Still spouting nonsense. Chapter 23:35. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji both frowned, paying attention to all the movements around them. The destruction of Yuan Tianji's physical body was only the first step. However, his powerful divine spirit would definitely not be destroyed so easily. In this battle, both of them were summarizing their findings. However, it was undeniable that both of them had a common worry: extraterrestrial demons were indeed not combative. If they met on the battlefield in the future with their current strength, they would definitely be at a disadvantage against such a strange enemy. They had to strengthen their soul attacks. Otherwise, they would not be able to pull such a team into the battlefield. At this moment, the calm sky was suddenly filled with wind and clouds again. A black fog curled up and flew. The more it spun, the faster it spun. Then, a human figure condensed from the black fog. Yuan Tianjia. It was Yuan Tianjia? Just like when he was alive. Just like just now. Everyone was shocked. Could it be that he could be reborn even after being destroyed? Could it be that this extraterrestrial demon was actually immortal? How could they fight against him? Some of the more knowledgeable experts sighed in their hearts. This was not Yuan Tianjia being reborn unharmed, but Yuan Tianjia's divine spirit appearing after his physical body was destroyed. Yuan Tianjia's divine spirit had actually reached an astonishing level where it could survive without the help of a physical body. Yuan Tianjia's godly soul floated quietly in the air. His eyes stared fiercely at Chu Yang, and he actually opened his mouth to speak. Chu Yang, you are indeed very powerful. You can actually completely destroy my physical body. But what you didn't expect is that my godly soul has already reached the transcendent stage of indestructibility. So what if you destroy my physical body? As long as I go back, we will meet again on the battlefield in a few years. In addition to the deep-rooted hatred in Yuan Tianjia's voice, there was actually some pride. What other methods do you have? You can use them one by one and see if you can stop my divine spirit from leaving. The group of experts were all dumbfounded, not knowing what to do. Yes, for an expert who had already reached this level, ordinary methods were indeed difficult to deal with, let alone destroy. Just because he was no longer afraid of any physical attacks in the world. But at this moment, a loud phoenix cry suddenly rang out in the sky, and a ball of raging fire burned without warning. In the land of fire, a person slowly stood up and said with a strange smile, "There are all kinds of laws in the world and there are ways to break them. Others may not be able to do anything to you, but since you have turned into a soul, there is no way you can escape from my grasp." In the midst of the raging flames, Rui Badong, who had been almost smashed into meat paste and had lost all signs of life, had actually completely recovered. He strode out, his entire body surrounded by blazing white flames, and rushed towards Yuan Tianjia at top speed. Yuan Tianming was shocked and shouted in disbelief, So you are that phoenix?" Rui Badong burst into laughter. "Yes, I'm that phoenix. Fuck your mother, what do you mean by that? It's that. It's a girl? Fuck. You, this sky fiend cub, don't even know how to speak properly. You deserve to die in your old hands." The indifference on the face of Yuan Tianjia's soul instantly disappeared, and a look of genuine horror appeared on his face. Suddenly he flew up rapidly, obviously wanting to escape and retreat unscathed. Rui Badong burst into laughter. "Idiot, a soul actually wants to run away in front of the Nirvana heavenly fire? You are a fucking idiot." With a boom, flames suddenly rose into the sky and filled the whole sky. In the blazing white flames, Yuan Tianjia's soul struggled painfully in the sky, turning into a long strip one moment, and then into a round ball the next. But no matter how he changed, he couldn't escape the burning of the monstrous fire. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that this flying devil king of the sky fiends was destined to fall here today. Chu Yang waved his hand and Rui Badong burst into laughter, shrinking the flames a little. In the flames, Yuan Tianjia's soul was still screaming in agony, earth-shattering. The continuous burning of the nirvana heavenly fire was something that even a man of steel couldn't bear. That was the ultimate pain that went straight to the soul. Not to mention being burned directly in the form of a soul? Chu Yang took a step forward and said, Yuan Tianjia, is it very painful? Yuan Tianjia's spirit was screaming. He was in extreme pain. For a moment he couldn't say a word. But his eyes were full of pleading as he looked at Chu Yang. It was obvious that Yuan Tianjia couldn't bear it anymore. The nirvana heavenly fire was indeed powerful. It could actually make a Skyfiend king so painful that he wished he was dead. As long as you answer a few of my questions honestly, I can make the decision to let you die a quick and painless death. You don't have to suffer this anymore. Chu Yang said softly. He believed that a quick and painless death was definitely something that Yuan Tianjia yearned for even in his dreams right now. Yuan Tianjia struggled painfully and asked, What do you want to ask me? I want to ask. Before Chu Yang could finish his words, the sky was suddenly filled with thousands of rays of multicolored light. An endless holy aura instantly filled the entire black cloud sky. A seven-colored cloud suddenly appeared in mid-air, and a voice said with a sigh, Yuan Tianjia, I didn't expect you to really be an extraterrestrial demon. The seven-colored cloud in the sky stretched out a big hand without any warning. On this hand there was even a section of a pure white sleeve. This hand actually ignored the nirvana heavenly fire that could burn everything in the world, and easily reached into it. It grabbed Yuan Tianjia's soul and said lightly, Extraterrestrial demon, you really have guts. You actually dared to enter my heavenly imperial court and fool everyone to this extent. Yuan Tianjia's remnant soul was obviously struggling violently. It wanted to say something but no sound came out when it opened its mouth. The owner of this big hand sighed softly and said lightly, Since you're an extraterrestrial demon, you deserve to be consigned to eternal damnation. The fingers gently clenched together and with a pop sound, it was as if a bubble was being crushed. Yuan Tianjia's soul was instantly crushed by this big hand. A surge of soul energy soared into the sky, and then turned into the purest spiritual energy in the world. Heavenly Emperor of the dark sky cloud, Yuan Tianjia, the extraterrestrial demon king of the flying demons. Finally, on this day, his soul had been completely destroyed, and he had completely disappeared from this world. It's the world-purifying hand, His Majesty the Saint Monarch has arrived. Mu Tsonglan, who had the highest cultivation, shouted with joy. The world-purifying hand was recognized as the #1 person in the heavenly imperial court, the Saint Monarch's famous move. The power of this move was unknown, because everyone who received this move had all died. When this hand appeared, all demons bowed their heads, and when this move was used, all demons and evils would die. Today this supreme move reappeared in the world, and it continued to write the legends of the past. Under this move, even Yuan Tianjia's soul, the flying demon king of extraterrestrial demons, was not spared. With one move, his soul was destroyed. That big hand did not disappear just like that. Instead, it continued to stretch out slowly and said lightly, Extraterrestrial demons, since you've come to the heavenly imperial court, then you can't be allowed to live. It actually grabbed Yi Luoyue, who was about to escape in the distance. Even with her cultivation, she did not have the slightest ability to resist this big hand. She was grabbed by that hand just like that. Then, with a crack, her entire body was instantly crushed into powder. Just like his master, his soul was destroyed and he was consigned to eternal damnation. In fact, he didn't even have the time to let out a scream. Ever since this big hand appeared, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji had very tacitly stopped all their subsequent actions. They only watched quietly as the subsequent events unfolded. They watched as this big hand easily destroyed Yuan Tianjia's soul and Yi Luoyue's soul. As for the remaining extraterrestrial demon horde on the ground, they were also wiped clean by everyone. Mo Yintian, this part of the world was finally clean. There were no more demonic evils in this place. But for some reason, when the two of them looked at the divine hand that was filled with righteousness and holy radiance, they couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. Whether it was Chu Yang or Mo Tianji, these two were extremely daring people. Although they were only in their 20s, the experiences they had in these 2 decades were more colorful than those old monsters and immortals who had lived for thousands, tens of thousands, or millions of years. Aside from having amazing cultivation and unparalleled skills, they were also confident that their intelligence was not inferior to anyone else's. The two of them thought back to all the opponents they had faced in the past. Some were shocked, some were respectful, and some were surprised. No matter if it was Diwu Qingru, the Tribulation Clan, the Fifth Law Supreme, or the Double Sky Demon, no matter how strong and powerful their opponents were, no matter how difficult it was to defeat them, they had never felt fear. However, at this moment, facing someone they had never met before, they actually felt a sense of fear from the bottom of their hearts. How could the two of them not be shocked? That extremely holy seven-colored cloud paused for a moment amidst the cheers of the crowd. Chu Yang and Mo Qianji could clearly feel that the person above wanted to say something, but in the end he did not say anything. After a while, that seven-colored cloud turned into an extremely dazzling seven-colored rainbow. It soared into the sky, leaving behind a boundless brilliance in the sky as it rapidly disappeared into the horizon. There was only silence left on the ground. His Majesty the Saint Emperor is invincible. Long live His Majesty the Saint Emperor. Suddenly a loud roar sounded. Tens of millions of people cheered at the same time. Chu Yang let out a soft sigh. This battle had finally come to an end. Tribulation against the Heavenly Emperor. Although he won in the end, he also paid a huge price. Chu Yang, Mo Qingwu, Dong Wushang, Gu Duxing, Luo Kadi, and GMO were all seriously injured. Mo Qianji, who had the lightest injury, also paid the price of having both his palms crippled. Rui Badong was even beaten until he was furious. However, the heavenly demon king that they were facing now was still in a bleak state where his strength had fallen to rock bottom and his cultivation was less than 10%. Chapter 23:36. Then? There were some things that one might not think much of when they were done, but when one reflected on them afterwards and looked forward to the future, one couldn't help but feel a bit of fear and confusion. Mo Tianji wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his newly reborn robe and said indifferently, "If Yuan Qinjie wasn't injured at all, with his cultivation, I'm afraid none of us would have survived today." Chu Yang nodded heavily to show his approval. The crazed book and the painting king were standing in an empty space. They seemed to have lost something. There was an indescribable melancholy and loss on their faces. In the end, he still couldn't take revenge with his own hands. For the two of them, this was undoubtedly an extremely regretful thing. However, there was nothing he could do. Both of them saw Yuan Tianjie's ultimate attack. If the two of them had fought face to face at that time, they would have been easily killed by Yuan Tianjie. In this world, perhaps only Chu Yang's Calamity Sword was unaffected and could counterattack immediately. Only Rui Butong's Nirvana Heavenly Fire could destroy such a divine soul. However, the empty melancholy in their hearts could not be dispelled. No one could dispel it. Revenge for his family, revenge for his brothers. At this moment all of these thoughts surged into his heart. That familiar voice and smile were still vivid in their minds, causing the two of them to feel unbearably sad and sorrowful. Compared to their desolation, Mu Tsanglan's mental state was much better. During this period of time, he had been carrying the stigma of being rebellious, ungrateful, and reckless. Especially since this stigma had been personally confirmed by the number one person in the imperial court, the Holy Monarch, there was almost no room for refutation. In this regard, Mu Tsanglan no longer held any hope of being able to wash away the stain on his name. However, in today's battle against the demons, the one who finally understood Yuan Tianming's heavenly demon divine soul was the Lord Sage. This undoubtedly meant that the Lord Sage approved of his actions. All the stain on his name had been removed. Although he couldn't help but recall his past friendship with Yuan Tianming, he felt extremely gratified in his heart. Yuan Qianji is confirmed to be a demonic evildoer. The Holy Monarch has personally killed the devil's spawn. These two pieces of news spread like a gust of wind. The entire black cloud sky suddenly became boiling. But no matter what, Yuan Tianji was dead in the end, and Mo Yuntian had finally eliminated this biggest hidden danger. The two armies joined forces. Given Mu Tsanglan's methods and his former prestige in the military, he was able to easily pacify the discontent of the opposing army. They set off majestically toward the capital. As for the original crime of the Dream Slayer army, it naturally disappeared. However, Meng Wuya no longer wanted to return to Mo Yuntian. Over there are also good brothers who went through the tribulation with me. We have the same goal, and that is to slaughter all the heavenly devils. General Mu, you'll always be my big brother. We'll meet again in the future on the battlefield outside the realm. Mu Tsanglan could only sigh at Meng Wuya's choice. Under the powerful effect of the heavy pill, everyone quickly recovered from their injuries. Chu Yang and the others didn't want to go. However, Xia Danxiong couldn't bear to part with the brothers who had just gathered. So he invited them with all his might. But everyone was also reluctant to part with them. So they formed the last echelon and set off together. Besides this reason, Chu Yang always felt that there should be some unsolved mysteries in Mo Yuntian that needed to be unearthed himself. Yuan Qinji was indeed dead, but his death also took away some of the mysteries forever. How did he sneak into Mo Yuntian back then? If he didn't have the support of a considerable force, it would be impossible for him to succeed. Chu Yang absolutely didn't believe that Yuan Qinji, who had no foundation, could reach where he was today. Secondly, during the Battle of Zishao Heaven, 2 of Zihao's 7 bodyguards died inexplicably in the black cloud sky. Was there a connection between the two? What in the world had happened? This was also another unsolved mystery. Apart from this, the other 5 of Zishao Heaven's 7 reinforcements all died in Mo Yuntian. Was there anything strange about each other? Perhaps others might not know about these people, but Yuan Qinji definitely knew. With these mysteries to be solved, how could Chu Yang give up if he didn't go to the palace to take a look? Tan Tan, who hadn't appeared all this while, finally appeared. He was dejected and listless. Of course Chu Yang noticed this guy. However, he ignored him. Until this night, Xia Danxiong specially ordered the guards to withdraw so that the entire campsite would become the private domain of Brother Jia. Everyone brought in a huge amount of wine and was ready to drink to their heart's content. Anyway, there were so many experts guarding outside. For example, Zi Sheqing, Mo Qingwu, Mo Lei, Chu Lur and the others didn't drink. Everyone was very assured about their own safety. Moreover, regarding the next step, it still required everyone to discuss with one another. A group of women gathered together and chattered noisily. A group of men gathered around a table and drank big mouthfuls of wine. It was very lively and noisy. GMO, Luo Kadi, and the others were flying all over the place while holding wine jars. They didn't stop for even a moment. Tan Tan had been drinking this wine in silence. He looked very lonely. However, everyone ignored him. Everyone knew that this guy couldn't hide his thoughts. Sooner or later, he wouldn't be able to hold it in and tell the whole story. However, they definitely couldn't take the initiative to ask him. If you asked, "What's wrong with you? Why are you so depressed?" Tan Tan would definitely say, "I can do whatever I want. Why do you care? You want to know what's wrong with me? I won't tell you." One sentence could definitely choke someone to death. Therefore, everyone had a tacit understanding not to ask anyone. They deliberately left him hanging, but of course they didn't talk about anything serious. They were just making a fuss, slapping each other's ass and fighting with each other. Often, 2 of them would hold down one of them and then pry open his mouth and pour wine in. The scene was so lively that it seemed like it was going to turn the sky upside down. The more lively it was and the more they ignored him, the more Tan Tan couldn't hold it in. Finally, bang bang bang. Tan Tan used his chopsticks to hit the plate hard. He said angrily, "Hey, hey. Everyone looked at each other and smiled knowingly. They all had an inexplicable sense of pleasure from a successful prank like, this guy really can't hold it in anymore. Chu Yang turned his head and said discontentedly, "What the hell are you doing? Are you trying to rebel? Eating is eating. Why are you hitting the plate? Isn't this spoiling everyone's mood?" Tan Tan's face showed infinite grievance. "I have something to say." Everyone said together, "What do you want to say?" Their voices were very uniform, faintly revealing a sense of ridicule. Tan Tan took a few hurried breaths. Then he finally shouted, "Haven't you guys noticed that I'm not normal these few days?" GMO frowned pretentiously and said, "Not normal? What's not normal? I don't see anything wrong with you." Luo Kadi showed a puzzled expression and said, "Could it be that you've come during those few days of the month? But you're a man." Everyone roared with laughter. Zi Sheqing and the other girls at the side all blushed and cursed angrily. They turned their heads to one side and ignored this group of stinky men. "You guys don't care about me at all," Tan Tan said in an aggrieved manner. The more he thought about it, the more aggrieved he felt. His eyes turned red. Dong Wuxiang suddenly stood up and shouted, "Who? Oh, who bullied my brother Tan Tan? Tell me. I'll help you vent your anger." Xia Danxiong rubbed his palms and said, "That's right. Tan Tan brother-in-law, tell me. Who was so blind to bully you? Could it be that girl Danfeng? It doesn't matter. Even if she's my biological sister as her uncle, I'll put justice before family and teach this stinky girl a lesson. Could it be that she's rebelling against her? Doesn't she know that treating her husband as her god is a principle that women need to abide by?" Everyone burst into laughter. Xie Danxiong's vehement speech, which was filled with righteous indignation, couldn't be more fake. It wasn't like Xie Danxiong didn't have eyes these past few days. How could he not see that his sister was bossing Tan Tan around? Between Tan Tan and Xie Danfeng, the one who had the final say was definitely his sister. The so-called principle between the two of them was that Tan Tan treated his wife as his god. There was no doubt about it. Therefore, Xie Danxiong's words were completely meaningless except for the fact that his sister Xie Danfeng rolled her eyes at him. Everyone comforted him one after another. But everyone's words of comfort carried a strong sense of schadenfreude and a sense of watching a show. After a round of comforting, Tan Tan, who was comforted, finally couldn't bear it anymore. He flew into a rage and suddenly stood up. He pointed his fingers one by one and scolded, "You bunch of hypocrites! I've seen through you." Everyone was taken aback when they heard this. Then they burst into laughter. Everyone was rocking back and forth as they laughed. Chuyang even spurted out the wine in his mouth. He slapped the table and laughed without any manners. Is this guy finally unable to bear it? What's wrong? What's wrong? Everyone laughed and asked. I've been depressed these past few days. I didn't even participate in that crucial battle against the devil. I've been living alone. But you don't care about me? Tan Tan's eyes turned red. He was furious. Are you still my good brothers? You've gone too far. Mo Chinji came out to smooth things over. Tell me what's going on. I wanted to ask but I didn't dare to. I really didn't dare to ask. Me too. The brothers nodded like chicks pecking rice. Tan Tan's mood finally improved a little. But he sighed again and said, You guys didn't even ask about my senior brother Chuyang? I'm so sad. We're the closest. Chuyang laughed out loud. What's the use of asking you? You didn't say anything. Who doesn't know that you talk as if you've eaten shit when you're depressed? Tan Tan suddenly realized, so, you guys were waiting for me to say it? Motherfucker, I won't say it. I won't say it even if you beat me to death. If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. Let's drink, everyone. Let's drink as if it's rare for anyone to hear it. Mo Chinji's attitude immediately changed. He raised his wine bowl and toasted. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.